There's quite a few then. And a lot of people just retired from here, right? George just retired. Bullock's on there twice. How come your name isn't on there, either one of you two? Neither mine. None of us are. Department is
Person today, or it would be. Hello, please.
Hello.
They have it.
So I got your carpet replacement all wrapped up. I'm up at the farm, and I put this project off forever. It's just, it had to get done. So, it was the water line, you had to go under the house, it was this distance right here. And, you go from here to there, and tie in from the pressure main that came in to a pipe that had sucked out the other wall to go over to the farm instead of a shed. So, pressure main that came in, laid it dry on the other side of the house for 2 years.
Check, check. Check, check. We good? Third check.
this is downtown.
Neither is that. That's out of town. Those pictures are town. There's no picture of.
So, the description of the project was community art, okay? And Brittany's the one that took it on, nobody else, okay? But we're gonna rotate them around though too, so we can rotate pictures around, so the goal was.
Seems like every time you ask,
So,
Julie, are you going somewhere for soup?
yeah, I mean, what is this, couple of days?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you found it, you found it.
So anyways, Brittany is also on money this year. Did a lot of different art, but each year. Like this year, $3,500 for just city art, and so the goal was city art. Yeah, we need a total contest is what we need with prizes, and the library is really good at running stuff like that. Yeah. No, you set the standards. Yeah. We got a good start.
It's not bad to have a bunch of kids.
So I mean, I put me.
Is that 40? Well, here we have the pictures and everything. She paid like 20. Well, the other thing that we weren't happy about is now we're supposed to get wood frames with canvas stitched on them, right? They keep on canvas now. They haven't done engineering down to that. That's what we thought we were getting. We ended up with these. And it's like this is just like a step down. So the whole thing was sort of a mess. Yeah. Anyway, I've never dealt with it.
I like it always.
So tonight, if we get to the goals, I'll shoot them to you, and then just cover any changes, Jay. Just change them. They're all highlighted. Okay. Well, I thought they said these. It's been known to happen, but I hope not. Well, I looked, I didn't find it.
Good evening, and welcome to the City Council Work Session for February 5, 2018. And with that, I'm going to call us to order, and I'm asking for a roll call, please.
Mr. Mayor, all present, duly noted with the exception of Councilor McKinney.
As an excused absence. Anything on the agenda, anything for the consent calendar? Any questions on the consent calendar? None on the consent calendar. Anything, other agenda items that you wanted any clarification on? None appearing. Anything for council business?
Yes, I want to give an update.
Council Edison.
I'm sorry. my light went on and I just went off.
The light's on, but nobody's home.
Yeah, I've heard that before. My wife, by several times. Yeah, I want to make a report on the Yamhill County Transit Advisory Committee meeting we had, and just give an update as where we're going on that.
All right. Anything else? I have a couple items for Sue, and possibly one from Joe. We'll see what time goes on that one. Anything else for council business tonight? Councilor Bacon.
I just wanted to mention a very successful fundraiser on Friday night that Matt and I attended for the Police Foundation and Canine Arco's new car.
Okay. Anything else? Then we will move on to the agenda items. Are there any questions or any comments that you have for Mr. Zook on the financial statements? None appearing, then we will then move to council priorities. Who's going to carry this? City manager?
Mayor and council, if it's okay, would you like me to go out in the front? It's going to be each people, or is it still okay for you to have department directors and stuff talking in this work session from their station? Is that okay?
No, that's fine.
Okay,
It's a work
all right.
session. We're not going to formalize it.
So what you have in your packet is the council priorities, and in the dark blue are things that have happened since the last time that we got together. And so those are the items. I'm not going to go over what we've done in the past or the descriptions of what we're trying to do with the council goals. So, but if you need anything answered about that, we can answer it. So I'll start with the first one about maintaining the state-of-the-art 911 center and the radio. So this is about the upgrade of what's happened since then. And in the order as we go down, the first one is about the dispatch center itself. This was looking at the older equipment and furniture that we have with the dispatch center, and we went to get some quotes about what it would take to upgrade that, doing it the same time that WACA does their work. And so we've gotten the quotes. It's about $70,000, and we're looking to see how that might fit in or not fit in with the budget that we have going forward. The text to 911, this is happening. So you'll start seeing publicity throughout our town and really throughout the whole system, including YCOM is going to go to text. And so shortly you'll see something in the public. And what this does is now with your text machine, you can go straight to 911, particularly if you can, you think about the situation with the schools and a while ago when they were hunkered down, they didn't want to talk. Well, if you have text, then you can be texting the situation where you're at. So, I mean, that's just the extreme, but you can be out some places where the sound quality isn't good, or you don't speak English, or you just have trouble verbally. You'll now be able to get a hold of 911. So that's a big plus. We've replaced some CAD computers. That's in there. That's done with an existing budget. And then we're still looking as part of the budget process of whether our 911 center should be a standalone or not. There's some real challenges with that. We'll cover it during the budget process with just alternatives for you. And then the comment about we've done an analysis of FiberLink. Fiber overall needs to be a broader discussion. We can go without it right now to our 911 center, but in another part of even in the goal priorities, we're just completing the mapping of what we have, and we're engaging people. School district, which you'll hear some of that when we have the joint city and school board meeting, they're going to ask about fiber and what can happen. The kids can use the Chrome that they have now, which, so if you remember this year, they've now rolled it out where every child has some smart device they can do homework. They're connecting with the young people through hotspots. So fiber doesn't really play a role. We thought it might, but they don't seem to need our help on that. So I think the biggest thing that where fiber is going to come in, one is for our system to make it more resilient when we have disasters or big windstorms and that. So we're going to work heading down that road. But the biggest part is going to be economic development, and particularly at the mill site. So as that converts to something else, hopefully industrial, hopefully it's someone who needs fiber. So we're just getting all the material ready. We're almost done, and then I'll just do a briefing, or Dave Brooks will do a briefing to you about the state of fiber and where we might go. It's not like we have any money, but at least we'll know that. And when we're attracting businesses, that becomes very important for Doug. With the radio system, we're marching down the road with WACA, getting the rest. We have a series of contracts, and you're going to see another contract that comes to you. It's within the budgets that we have. Everything so far is staying within that $3.1 million budget, and we have a lot of implementing contracts with subcontractors doing the work, and that's going as expected. Part of this, there's on the second page under an action, it was about subscriber need radios identifier, and we're a subscriber, as is TVFNR and Dundee Fire. So we're using Mary Newell, and she's working hand in hand with WACA. We're on track. We've identified where our radios are, what the call signs are there, and the availability of all the space. And so far, it's as we have thought it was going to be, and we're moving down the road with that.
Clarification, if I may.
Yes.
I'm looking at the second action item,
Subscriber radios.
and you say something about radios and storage. Can you give me, put some flesh on that?
It just means that we have, I don't know how many, I'll get you the number, but we have several that just are spare radios, and they do not have assigned numbers. But that was tied to TVFNR, bought some extra radios, and we actually have some of them. And so they're going to be plugged into the system, not at our cost, but TVFNR, but we're managing them for the time being. And I'll get you the number of radios there.
Are these handheld or mobile units or
Yeah,
what?
no, they're the handheld radios.
Thank you.
The next one is about the cost and the financing, and there's a description there, but I'll ask Matt to just jump in and give a Reader's Digest version of where we are on financing of communication systems.
Sure, thanks, Joe. Matt Zugic, Finance Director. We've gone through a search for the best option for financing for this project. At one point, we were looking at an equipment lease with U.S. Bank, who's our bank that we do our daily operations with. In the course of doing that, though, November, both Truman and I were reviewing that agreement and thought, we need to have some more due diligence on whether or not this is the best option, as well as get some bond counsel. And so we actually engaged Piper Jaffray, who is a well-known municipal advisor / bank placement agent in the industry. And we ended up engaging him to become a placement agent. Essentially what he will do is go out and put an RFP out for 50 different banks, if you will, and they'll all respond competitively. And he does what we can't do. They have a whole team that does that. For a mere $20,000, we actually find that we could probably even get as good of a rate or better, even though the rates are increasing. So we're working through that, and we're getting a better product, getting some better review on it. And we actually will have before you on February 20th the authorization to go ahead and proceed with that. In addition, there's a schedule included in that, will be included in that packet. And we look to wrap the whole process up by the end of March. So we're getting in on the early part of 2018, where rates will continue to remain low, and get a good product. So we're excited about that.
Another item that I'm sorry, I didn't update it, and now I realize this, we left off. One right above that about tower location. There's also been activity on that. We've been going through a process of pre-application with consultants, finding a location. We've agreed on what we believe the right location is, which is the maintenance yard. And now the site selection / engineering for the actual tower construction is going to, the plan is to do two things. Having at least one, potentially two public hearings where the neighborhood around the, just like we do any planning commission item, where the people around the maintenance yard will be invited to a public meeting here, where we'll talk about the tower, how big it is, what it'll look like, what the impact might be on the neighborhood. And that's in advance of going to the planning commission for actually a variance on the tower. And that's all to happen, and I'll update with some other times. That's all to occur in February. Last week of February, I think, is what the schedule is for that. So bottom line, there's a lot on there. You know, we don't have it all paid for. We're going to talk a little bit more when we get to TDF&R about different strategies for paying the bills. We have it in the budget, but it just, our financing needs to be paid back. So that's what we still have to resolve. But the technical, in terms of being in sync with WACA for the upgrades to the primary 911 center, to our 911, to getting the antenna and getting the radios, is all progressing as expected. And we'll start seeing some rollout, and then some of the things like the text to 911, just a good benefit for us being part of that system, and that's a benefit to people now. The second goal is about streets and sidewalks, and that's Jay.
Good evening, Mayor Andrews, Council. Jay Harris, your Public Works Director. Give me a moment. So, goal 2.2. Karn and the engineering department just completed the 5-year capital improvement plan, and the plan assumes the existing level of funding, which is about $1.8 million a year. And we're working on updating the pavement condition index model to the 5-year plan. And so we'll know a little more. I have a presentation with you folks in the second meeting in March to go over supplemental funding for the payment system to see if we need money to close the gap still, because we knew the transportation utility fee might not be enough. So I'll know more at that time, at that meeting, what it looks like right now with the 5-year plan, and with the potential of supplemental funding, because I was told to maintain pavement condition index. One thing about the pavement condition index is it will dive for some years until it takes off. So what that means is there's a lot of pavement out there that is obviously in the decline, and it's going to take us a while to catch and to start coming back into the positive again, if that makes sense. It's not like what we did last summer and the summer before will be enough, you know, to withstand the erosion of the pavement condition index. But we're thinking about year 3 of the program is, you know, where we should start holding our own, hopefully, that the amount that's deteriorating is about the amount we're repairing. So there's more to come there. So a couple things just on revenue. This is on item 2.3. That again, we're going to meet on March 19th. We're going to talk about when we adopted the transportation utility fee, we didn't know that the state package for roadways was going to go through, and we do have some shared revenue coming in of about another $500,000 a year, which was good. That's going to cover a lot of the gap that we knew we had when we adopted the transportation utility fee, about $500,000 a year. So we're getting close. So one of our recommendations perhaps in that March meeting might be to just hold off and wait a year and then go back and do a comprehensive survey of all the streets, maybe wait 2 years, have someone go walk them all again and actually visually do the pavement condition index rather than trying to model it in the office. Obviously, it costs a little bit more money, but it would give us a much more accurate update. That's all I have. Aha. Yeah, what that talks about is that we're just going to update the capital project list every year. So every year we come to council with that year's capital improvement project plan. So you'll see coming up soon our 1-year CIP. Well, with that, we're going to also, in the background, you'll be looking at a 5-year plan. So we just keep leapfrogging projects ahead, obviously. So the same thing with the pavement is the projects we have done already. The ones that are out in year 5 might not actually, they might happen in year 4 or they might happen in year 6. You know what I mean? That they're far enough out that there's enough changes and moving parts of different projects that are going on with maybe pipeline projects or a developer-related improvement where we might be shuffling some things around. So the 5-year project list is going to be updated every year. So moving forward, that will be available. And Joe, I don't know if Rosa made that the plans available yet for everybody. So we were going to post that up on the website, and I don't know if that's made it there yet or not.
So what we do have, and at the March 19th we'll present that, we've completed the maps that then take the 5 years, and all of the improvements to each of the streets that we're planning to improve are on there. What I've asked Karin to do is to break it out with a listing of the names of the streets so that, and we'll have that before you get to the March 19th, that a person can then go in and look at their street. There's a little reluctance of Karin, because she goes, you know, if we put this out, and so we're debating this, says, well, if we put it out, what happens if we want to make some change to, it's on year 2, it's shown as a slurry seal or a paving project. And I think that there's a value even with that. If we know what our, you know, we have a plan, what we're going to do for the next 5 years on streets. And there may be some modifications to that, but I think the value of showing, because the majority of those projects are all going to get done, and they really will get done, that there's a value in somebody being able to look at it and say, that's my street. And if we have one, for whatever, for some legitimate reason, that a street doesn't get done that last year, and we have to explain it to that neighborhood, I would rather take that on, because the majority will be done according to what the plan is.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Johnson?
Hi. I appreciate your outlook on that. I would come back with a different approach, and that is I would balance it between here's what we did and here's what we're going to do in the next CIP. Because what I'm concerned about is if we put out a 5-year plan, you're going to be put in a situation where people are going to look at that. So let's say I'm not on council and I look and I say, hey, they're going to do, you know, Hewlett, woohoo, and then we don't do it. They might not even call the city. They might just run around their neighborhood and say, well, they were going to do the street and they didn't do it. What I think the efforts would be better spent on is hey, look at these new streets we just did, or look at the slurry seal we just did, and look at how many miles we did. And, oh, next year, these projects are slated. Because, you know, Jay knows this and Karin knows this. We can have another pipe break, and while we got the street tore up, hey, why not shift our budget around to redo a street that needs to be done, but it was in year 6, it's year 3. I mean, that would just be my recommendation as, just from a PR standpoint. I think you get a lot more mileage in putting up a little sign or doing an article in the newspaper, or even just posting on Facebook, hey, look, here are the streets we're doing this summer, than you would year 4, year 3, year 2. You know what I'm saying? That's just my opinion, but I don't want to micromanage either.
No,
so.
and that was Karin's opinion too. So we'll take that back. So we can do that and just do that. We already have, and we're ready to start showing that to you and to the public too. Streets that we've done over the last, I think we've done the maps for the last 3 or 4 years. And then we have the future. So we'll just cut it off and say we have other ones that are the, chip sealing and slurry sealing, but here's the ones that are in the next year. And we have those identified that'll present it on March, and then you'll see it in the budget also, in addition to the 5-year CIP overall plan. So. The next one is about TVF&R. Big one now is we're waiting for an election to get that done. But we have also been meeting, and in my update I'll do it. We had another meeting with the board and with the staff of TVF&R. So we're beginning to put together the memorandum of the annexation of the steps that are necessary between now and taking effect on July 1, as if it's going to happen in July. And some of the big things that will be in that IGA will be, one is the sale of fire equipment, and they're already working on some of that. So I may come back with a one item saying they're authorized to act on our behalf as soon as the election is over in March 13th, because they'd like the authority to actually do that. They've made contact with some fire departments, particularly about 2 pieces of equipment, the Terminator and the Brig, and the aerial ladder. And then the other parts that will be in there will, probably the biggest one is the disposition of the 2 stations and the empty land that's right next to the Springbrook station. A few other mechanics about records and just finalizing up any settlement with sick leave and vacation they had. But that's coming. The big thing is to get the March election, which is coming up quickly. We don't have really a role in that, and they're keeping us informed of the actions they've been taking. And then later in the meeting, if the mayor or Councilor Bacon wants to talk about, they can do that too. The next one is about the employee retirement plan. So we have had some moving up that. So Anna and either one, Anna or Matt, can cover that.
You will be presented, council, with a...
We're not hearing you.
Move it up closer.
Move a little closer.
Sorry. You will be presented, council will be presented with an updated AFSCME contract that will, as of January 1st, 2018, move all AFSCME employees to the PERS system, newly hired employees. I'm working with the Joe and Matt in regards to perhaps putting together other groups of employees that are currently in NERPS and maybe moving them to PERS if they need to or whatnot. Well, we're still working on the details of that. I think you were presented with a financial analysis of the difference of the cost of each of the plans last time we met, which is substantial. So we're still diligently working on that. But the big piece of it is currently we're moving the AFSCME group over to the PERS plan as newly hired employees as of January 1st, 2018, which is a huge step. So that's the update that I have.
Question, if I may, Anna. The status of any discussion with PERS on contract modification to include this group?
Most definitely. I'm working with Peter Nelson at PERS right now. He is going to be drafting an updated PERS agreement for me to present to council. He did mention in my conversation, and I confirmed this with Truman Stone, our city attorney, that any newly hired employees within that contract of AFSCME, the AFSCME unit, can still be put into the PERS plan without an executed contract, and PERS would accept that. Did that answer your question, Mayor?
I think so, thank you.
On the technology, for just 2 line items, it covers a lot of stuff. I think as we get a little bit closer into the budget, there's a value in us revisiting the technology plan that David had brought to us before. So we're meeting the goals of what we're doing is using technology. Probably the biggest thing that's changed since the last time we met is the e-Track-It system. So the 2 project managers we have are Karen and Doug. So I'll ask Doug to just kind of give us, again, for those people that don't know, what the e-Track-It system is and isn't, and where we're at in that.
Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So the Track-It system is an overall permitting software that allows planning, building, engineering, public works, some of the operations for some of their permitting. It's all in one system. So, and it talks to one another, and it links into the Springbrook software for the financial. So there's a download that happens every night. So when the council had the goal to have one system, this was one big piece of that in order to make things more efficient. We've had some hiccups, of course, you always do when you have a new software, but we're working through with the vendor, Superion, and getting that stuff worked through. The kinks are being worked out. And as it's noted in here, there's some configuration modifications that are being done to the system as well. And all the departments are looking at their workflows to make sure they work correctly. I know engineering spent a lot of time on this, on the whiteboard exercises, making sure when something comes into the counter, how does it get logged in? How does it get reseated? Where does it go? Then the checks and balances with public works staff of who reviews what, and how that's coordinated back up to community development with planning and building. So looking at those workflows to make sure they're the right workflows. Just because we did something one way for decades doesn't mean we do it the same in the future or presently, because we have new software that allows us to be more efficient. That's it.
So, Doug, would you mention just to the public or to somebody developing with the city, what difference does this system make?
Overall, it's more efficient. So the outside public can actually go online and look at the status of their permits, and so they know where things are at in the flow. So questions have come up. It's like, well, something comes in on one day, and then it shows that 6 weeks later we're supposed to have reviews done. So I'll use the building as an example. It takes generally 4 to 6 weeks to review a building set of plans. Simple residentials, we have a statutory requirement to do those in 10 days. So online, you can go in and look and know, I submitted my application, I'm supposed to have my reviews done here. It even drills down a little bit further because it gives you time frames where different departments are supposed to have their reviews done and comments back to building on a particular set of plans. So that transparency to the public side. It also allows for the public, you can pay for your permits online. Once we get the kinks worked out of it, we want to go to electronic plan review. So that means applicants could submit their plans online. We would do online review. You'll see in the budgets coming up, engineering and planning and building will be proposing some dollars to get the software and hardware that's needed to be able to do that. Business licenses, we've had some problem with that. We're getting that fixed. But that'll allow all the business licenses can all be done online and paid online. So we don't have to send out invoices. It'll be automatically done. You can pay with your credit card online, so you don't have to write a check. You don't have to come to the counter. So it makes it easier for the public to be able to interact with the city when they can do it on an online platform.
The next goal, 6, revolves around our financial, our planning and policies. So that's Matt.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In the process of 2 years ago, there was one of the 5 goals, when you had 5, to develop a long-range financial plan and policies. The most recent activity on that is that you have seen the long-range financial plan in action to generate discussion and get some good feedback from the council as we prepare the 18-19 budget. So that we focused on the general fund for the majority of that development, but behind that are 16 other funds that we anticipate rolling out. One of the thoughts I've had is to have that kind of dovetail into the budget document, so that as we're looking at a particular fund in the budget, we can show you a 5-year projection as well there. Policies have been developed in light of the challenge that we have in the general fund. We're looking at that policy and going, okay, we don't want to handcuff ourselves with a policy and then instantly violate it. So we're looking at that, and as we go out to borrow, one of the questions that may come up from a bank is, hey, what kind of financial policies do you have? So we're balancing those two, the need for a policy, but also the need to be prudent in how we manage our finances. Fortunately, the fruit of the whole long-range financial planning process is that we're doing something today. We've had conversations, 6 months ago for things that we're looking at in 18, 19, and beyond. So if you were to ask any lender or any citizen, hey, what are we doing with our finances, we'll be able to say, hey, we're looking at what is coming down the road well in advance. We have some challenges. We know we need to deal with those, but we're steps ahead of where we were 2, 3, 4 years ago. So.
And Goal 7 is about urban growth boundary, and that also has had a lot of activity in the last month or so. And a big part of this is that Doug has kind of stepped out from a lot of other cities, working with the state to try to fix this. We were the first guinea pig or example working on the streamlined process. There were mistakes on it. So we could have just said, forget it, and walked away and go back to the traditional process. But Doug has carried that to the state. And we've gotten a lot of kudos from them saying, yeah, we don't know if we would have put up with some of the deficiencies in the law or in the ordinance, in the ORS. He's fixing those. Likewise, and this is also important, we'll update you tonight, is that we see some challenges between the assessor and how the information about assessments and values connects to the state. And so between Doug and Matt, they've taken the role of getting the players together and say, there's a disconnect here, guys, work on it. So Doug?
Doug Rux again, character flaw, like to fix things. So under 7.1, we're working on the draft scope of work. We're very close to having that finalized. And actually, I read the most recent version of the contract today. We made some last-minute edits. So I think,
clarification, if I may, Doug.
yes.
When you cite ORS, ORA, the Oregon Administrative Rules, Chapter 660, Division 38, is that the new expedited, or is that the traditional?
That is the new simplified method, commonly called the streamlined method.
Thank you.
So working on the scope, 7.1, the second action there is when we did the buildable lands inventory we shared with you, that's where we found some technical fixes that needed to occur to the administrative rule. So in the new scope of work, there will be an update to the preliminary buildable lands inventory, which will occur after the state does the technical fixes, which are supposed to be done by the end of June of 2018, and then we'll go back and redo the buildable lands inventory. So we've kind of taken the whole process and turned it upside down and approaching it a little bit different. Under 7.2, evaluate the options, and I think city manager touched on this, is that we're moving forward with the simplified, so what we're calling the phase 2 process under Division 38. Working with the DLCD, so as I shared with you before, we did submit a letter into DLCD, went to LCDC, got them to agree to put in their policy agenda to do the technical fixes. So there's a rules advisory committee being established, and they're reaching out to stakeholders. They think they'll have what's called the RAC, Rules Advisory Committee, in place in March. And there'll just be more time spent in Salem monitoring, tracking what's going on. The applying, again, working on the draft scope. The issue of the county assessor's information. So what we found, Before, as we ran the numbers on the simplified method, we also then had a consultant look at the traditional method and found that delta difference of 400 acres between the two methodologies, 386 acres. So we went out and had a meeting with the county assessors, so Echo Northwest is back under contract with us. Found some enlightening information about the county, how county assessors in the 36 counties and what they have to operate under from the Oregon Department of Revenue, and how they classify things, and kind of the comment came back, you would never do this land to improvement ratio methodology because that's not how county assessors classify properties, developed, vacant, partially developed. So we're putting together a memo. We'll be. So there's a provision in the streamlined method is that you have to look at the improvement value to the land value, and there are certain triggers that if the ratio is under a certain, then it's considered to be vacant. Another level is partially vacant, or another level it's considered developed. The county does not categorize data that way. We have 309 properties within the city of Newberg that are tax exempt. So they have no real market value assigned to them. Of that, 154 of those properties, the county knows has improvements on them, but it doesn't have a real market value associated with those improvements. So you have this administrative rule for land purposes who says you got to look at it one way, but you have county data that has something that's different. And counties, of the 36 counties, 3 counties have attempted to assign real market values to exempt properties. And we're told that hasn't worked very well. So what you have is 33 who don't do it. And so it skews the data in Division 38 because you've got properties that are improved, religious organizations, schools, so forth, cities, counties, state properties, and you have no value to be able, so it shows up on your inventory as being vacant or partially vacant. So it skews the numbers. So we're going to be sending information back to the state and suggest that they go have a meeting. The assessors and tax collectors meet once a quarter, is that they really need to go talk with them about how they categorize property and see if we can get that provision of the rule fixed. Grants moving forward. Then the last one. Oh, the committee. So there was a Citizens Advisory Committee that was advising staff when we went through this first phase of the UGB stuff. We're going to come back and formalize that like we do with other ad hoc committees now that we've got the protocols in place. But we have reached out to the members who were on that committee. Only a couple have said no, they don't want to continue on. And we've pulled together and identified the technical people who would be on the Technical Advisory Committee. And so that will be some different state agencies, Employment Department, Regional Solutions, Business Oregon, DLCD, tried to get the Housing Authority. Unfortunately, they're going to go through a transition, so wasn't able to do that. So we might have one more technical seat to fill. That's it.
Question, if I may?
Yes.
Rex, on this last item, your Citizens Committee, who's forming that?
Cheryl Keynes will be talking to you while I'm out for the next week. She got her instructions this morning. We have a list for you to look at. Basically, it's the same people that we had when we spent a year and a half working on phase 1.
So Doug, just in brief, can you tell what's about a timeline of looking at bringing something forward that looks at really expanding urban growth?
The contract we have with the DLCD will be by May 31st of 2019. We will have done the analysis. A year and a half from now, we will have done the analysis. We've done serviceability analysis. We've redone the buildable land. We've looked at then at what we need for residential land, what we've needed for employment land, and that will all be essentially ready for adoption. It doesn't mean the council will have to adopt it, but it will be in a form that you could adopt it at that point in time. That would then start us into there's a more formal process to go through with DLCD that might take another 6 months to a year after that. So you're at least a year and a half to not 2.5 years away.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Johnson?
you mentioned DLCD and down in Salem, you're monitoring things. If there's any way I can help with that, let me know.
Okay.
Okay, the next item is about affordable housing, which is also Doug's.
So on the affordable housing front, council had 3 work sessions, 1 business session from the Housing Newberg proposals. So you completed that back in December. Then I'm going to kind of walk through the actions that you took. So the first one was on annexation policy. So we're working on that. We will go to the Planning Commission on March 8th. Anticipated to come back to council in April for your consideration, and that would be comprehensive plan changes. We don't think we have to do anything on the development code side, but I'll double check that before we get to the Planning Commission. Accessory dwelling units, that's one that you asked us to advance and look forward and work on for them in the next 18 to 24 months. Part of this comes out of SB 1051, where the accessory dwelling unit provisions are indicated. So I've already started conversations with the Planning Commission on this. We'll be talking with the Affordable Housing Commission later this month, and then kind of back and forth between those 2 commissions to put together a proposal that will then go back to Planning Commission and then on to City Council. Construction excise tax is one that you identified for staff to work on. I haven't put together a timeline or anything for that, but I will be working on that in the future. Subsidized workforce housing is one the council did not direct staff to work on. The housing ombudsman did not direct us to work on that, but effectively I do that anyway on a daily basis. Missing middle housing is one that you asked us to work on. So we've had some internal discussions with staff, but we haven't put together a time frame for that one yet. Expedited review and permitting, you did not ask us to work on that one. Public street standards, again, you did not ask us to work on that. System development charge and deferrals, you did not ask us to work on that over the next 18 to 24 months.
Question for Doug, if I may. On the public street standards, will the subsequent action that may be taken, pro or con, doesn't make any difference, on the PUD, will that be a genesis for future discussions on public street standards?
Mayor, it could. I think I would probably answer this way. Council directed us to work on 4 of the 9 proposals first. And so when we work through those, then we'll come back and say, okay, there are 5 proposals that were still sitting there. There were 5 or 6 that were kind of forward-looking, kind of track and watch. So we'll keep looking at it. And so the discussions on PUDs could be a catalyst to talk about street standards. But as I've mentioned to everybody, is that we just adopted the transportation system plan. It took us 5 years to do that. To go back into that transportation system plan and start looking at roadway classifications and street widths is a big project, and there would be a significant expense.
Thank you.
Next item is brief comment about the Riverfront Master Plan. And one of the things here is that I think you individually and publicly have said, please do not burn out Doug in community development. We're still short a planner, so there's some particulars about the master plan, but I think in general the direction has been let this slide against all of the other priorities with community development until we get another planner on board.
So Doug Rux again. So in the Riverfront Master Plan, the statement of work has been drafted and coordinated with the TGM Transportation Growth Management Program and the identified consultant. The contract and the language is now at the DOJ, Department of Justice, to be reviewed. We checked in last week, and they said that's where it is, and they had not heard anything from DOJ. So we were anticipating starting the planning work in February, but as we're rapidly getting towards mid-February, it may now kind of push into March. And as city manager said, we're working on recruitment for a vacant position, so it'd be nice to get that one filled so we could do a redistribution of work.
Goal 10 is around emergency preparedness. This is an item that doesn't have a budget, but Jay has picked that up with the different strategies that are listed, and we've had some activity on that.
Mayor Andrews, Council Jay Harris, your Public Works Director. The first action, 10.1, organize and train city organizations for emergency response and mitigation. So I had Jill Durrell go in and to see what employees have had what training. It was important. And then to get copies of all those certificates, and then get people, a bunch of people have got additional training done. And moving forward, we're going to be moving the tracking of those certifications. It's the employee's responsibility to get the certificate and maintain their own records, but getting copies of that will be going into the HR file that Anna and their system is going to take care of that, because there's a lot of paper flying around, right? So that's a good thing there. So that's moving forward. On item 10.3, set up storage area for needed supplies for primary and secondary EOCs. This is our primary emergency operations center, and the supply storage is very limited. It's the judge's chamber also. We are looking to add some countertop space down there where Dave's at. And we got a budget for it, and we're going to be including that in next year's building improvements. Review and modify any equipment and infrastructure needed for the EOC. Mary Newell submitted a grant to the Homeland Security for a storage container that's going to be stored in the PD lot here. And some ready-to-eat meals is part of that, and some fuel bladders so we can move some fuel around between facilities. So we'll know in June to see if the grants were received for that. Ensure adequate staffing is available to operate the EOC. And we have a bunch of people that have recently completed the coursework, and we'll add to the pool available here to operate the EOC, and we'll be looking at some additional training moving forward for people, more specifically the 304 level class work, which it's about 3 to 4 days worth of classroom work, and they run through a bunch of emergency operation paperwork, exercises, action plans, that sort of thing. Coordinate fire medical communications and response protocols with TVFNR, and we are working with TVFNR right now to come up with some sort of training exercise that will be valuable to both our teams. Most of it probably revolve around communications on a multi-agency type of scenario.
And recently we've been active of inviting, and they've come to us, both the Yamhill County Emergency Preparedness, Sheriff's Office, and TVFNR, and then this last time we even had Verizon. So in our regular meetings about disaster preparedness, we're inviting these other agencies, and they're showing up when they're being asked. Goal 11 is about economic development. Doug?
If I may, did you want to announce the preparedness fair at the Northwood Christian Church in April?
I will when I get the actual date. I'll look on my calendar. But this will be the second one. We had the one at the LDS Church, and now Newberg Christian has picked up the ball, and they're having a large community fair. We will be there as one of the presenters, but Christy Cook is kind of leading a large disaster preparedness fair, and we'll use Rosa with also advertising that, and we'll ask you to put that on your calendar. Okay. April 9th.
So Doug Brooks again on economic development strategy. So the work group on this meets on a monthly basis. We did take the month of December off so people could enjoy their holidays. People were out of town. On the downtown plan, kind of listed in here, a number of things. You're going to get a formal report from me on the activities of the downtown plan for the first year, and you'll be getting that at your March 5th meeting. But this is kind of a highlight to things that have taken place. So working on the appraisal, we're working on the appraisal for the Butler property. Andy McCann had proposed a 20-unit apartment project at 2nd and Edwards. That's gone through land use approvals, now got building permits in. I've been talking with some individuals about a hotel in the downtown area. We talked with a party interested in doing some repurposing of buildings and land at the corner of First and Blaine Street. It would be at the northwest corner. Then we've had some facade things. So Chapters did their front facade. They got a $93,000 grant from the Oregon Main Street program. Parks, state parks. Tom Tessmer redid the facade of the old Cancun building. So we've got two buildings now that look very much like they did when they were originally constructed. Not 100%, but they're a lot closer. Both are historic buildings and had to go through historic review. We got the food cart pod that's open on First Street, down off the center, and so there are 5 vendors that are operating in there now. So that took a couple years, but we finally got there. We've had a pre-application meeting for another office building down on 2nd Street. So 2nd Street's kind of that mixed use of residential, commercial operations. We've met with another party who was interested in some apartments in the downtown area along 2nd Street as well. Under the tourism strategy, so at the time we wrote this, there were 3 recommendations that were brought forward for the Destination Development Marketing Grant. Council approved 2 of those, referred 1 back to the TLT committee, which will be occurring in March. The TLT Marketing Subcommittee has been talking about the marketing program. They put together a proposal with changes at the chamber. They're going to be talking about that later this month. It probably will not get to the full TLT committee for review and consideration and development of a recommendation until March, and that would put something back in front of the council to consider in April. That's it.
The next one on communication with Rosa, there's been a lot of activity. There's all of like 8 minutes left, so I think that deserves another separate time. We'll figure out and a part of a business section to cover that one, and a little bit broader discussion about technology. And maybe in your last few minutes after we do transit, you might think, well, do you want more discussion, do you want any discussion with council of feedback other than an occasional question, or you're comfortable with that? Maybe we need to split this up. I know there's only so much time, but I feel badly when we present, and maybe there's some more input that you want and need to give to us that. So Rosa and Dave will put on to in business item of council within the next 2 meetings of that, a little bit broader discussion. And the final one is about transit, and I know that Councilor Essen is going to talk about the master plan of transit, which is what this is all about. Maybe he can talk at this point, if you want, Mayor, of what he had, and that's basically our report for transit. Or you can have the next 8 minutes of discussions of kind of, okay, you heard some things, you still have any questions or other feedback for us?
You can draw all the things you want together before we adjourn, and that is your council business?
I think I can handle this pretty quickly.
Great.
As you all may remember, when I first was appointed to the Yamhill County Transit Committee, that they were talking about, gee, how would you people like to lose your routes and maybe go another way? Then in 2017, they've got all this funding, and it's between $2 and $3 million per year. And now we're talking at the planning committee about, what bells and whistles would you like on your routes? Would you like any more routes? And so we presented at the last meeting a 4-route system, and I think the council is aware that we don't currently serve up around the Allison and that whole section of town. So they're thinking that they're going to add that route. Now I notice Joe's put together, and that would be 4 routes. And I also was discussing direct routes instead of circular routes, and could they get that done? They're now going to try to do, there's a whole panoply of things that they're discovering they want to do. And so that's what the planning committee that Patrick's been nice enough to say come to, and that we'll have, I think, more meetings on that, or at least another meeting. So that's the good news. One of the things that happened at the meeting was we asked for a transit hub. And
A transit
hub.
It's a hub, yes, and that would be, I think, isn't that where we now hold our farmers market there, similar to that spot?
You know, so that we don't get into condemning public land by
Yeah.
identifying what the property is.
Yeah.
What has been identified in the draft master plan that Councilor Esten was talking about is they've said that the whole advisory board buys off on the concept of establishing a transit center hub someplace in our downtown area.
Right.
And so we've asked them to consider some empty lots that might be where both the east and west buses can come together, and then you can get off of those buses and go to other local buses in town. So the two commuters continue to go, they'd have one stop, and then from there you could go to those routes he was talking about, ADEC, some down at the waterfront, those areas that are not served right now.
So that means, and as we were doing our planning amount, and I don't know how I'm doing my time, planning actions, they're talking about extending routes out to for businesses so that people can go to work down 99 all the way out to Tigard, and they are even talking about 30-minute time as far as maybe in between buses, 30 minutes and things like that. And they're discussing all this, so that's what we've been involved with. They, at the meeting, said, well, we won't be funding the hub at this time. We're going to have to go for grants, and there are no grants. So as you may all, I think I sent everybody on the council a email that I also sent to Stan Primovich, who's now taking over for Rick Olson on this committee, and suggested that if they were to put that hub in the first year, because everything they're putting in is going to be no capitalization. In fact, there's still a question about whether they're going to add buses, and of course, how do you have a system without additional buses? So they're going to have to add in some capital items, and I'm just suggesting to them that maybe they ought to consider that. So that's something that they've not said no on, but that's what we're working on. And I don't know, I guess if you have any other questions, I can answer it, but that's pretty much it.
Did you have any follow-on, city manager? Questions for Scott on transit in Newberg? Again, the funding out of HB 2017, the transportation package is how much?
It looks like $2 to $3 million a year for like 20 years. And they're planning on using it for operations. And that's for the whole county, but they certainly have enough money for a reason. We do, and we just need that. So it's kind of how it's run. Trying to say, let's take a look at it together, because they're asking a whole lot of questions that I'm having to do a lot of research to figure out what we're doing. One of the things I guess I should add is we're definitely looking at maybe making a stop where they come off of Highway 99, turn right before the hospital, then they can go directly in on the main line, so that people coming from over the hill or some other city can actually turn right, and then just take them right into the hospital entrance where they don't have to get there. Just let them off the entrance. So there's a lot of bus stops I've been sitting and complaining about. We don't have bus stops out there. Virtual bus stops. No sign.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Any further comments? Anything else before us before work session? Otherwise, we'll be adjourned and we'll reconvene at approximately 7:10. With that, we are adjourned. We reconvene. We'll be at ease. It's up.
So
Mr. Mayor, all present duly noted with the exception of Councilor McKinney, who is an excused absence.
Thank you. Would you please rise for a pledge of allegiance? Can you uncover, please? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. City Manager's report, please.
Mayor and Council, Joe Hannon, your city manager. You have a copy of what I'm going to just briefly cover tonight, as does the press, about what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Again, it's been a busy past 2 weeks. We spent some of the time in the last 2 weeks working on a GPS policy, and this is the global positioning system that tracks our vehicles, or we have the capability to do that in police cars. And we want to implement that to help us with officer safety. You might remember less than a year ago we had a state patrol officer was shot nearby, and it was the fact that there was a GPS system there transmitting where the car is that helped with people getting there. And we have the capability. It doesn't cost us any more money, but it's a matter of putting it in and then making sure that the union, because this is a change working conditions, also agrees to that. So chief, city attorney, and HR are working on that one. I accompanied Doug, and we took our new graphic reporter, Susan, and who's out here tonight, on Brandon, on a tour of some of the facilities, and tried to ply her with our point of view so that she would always write in favor of the city. But showed her the, that's a joke, showed her the facilities that we have. It just kind of helps for background of other stories. An item that's on the agenda tonight, but met with the Newberg Shelter President Krista Eberly and one of the board members who had been here before, Mr. Lipinski, to discuss a proposal of a right of first refusal. Excuse me. And then we continued the coordination with the foundation that is looking as a possible financer for purchasing of the shelter. There'll be more tonight. We've participated, as you've already heard, with the Amhill County Transit. There's another staff person, Brad Allen, from Community Development, that is the staff person for that. So between the two of us, we try to assist Councilor Essen. And you've heard a lot of the recommendations with that, including greater support and redefining of the routes that we have within the city, also considering a transit center or stop in the city, and coming very soon will be some public hearings with all those draft recommendations for the public and also with council. And we also, with Jay Harris and Karen Hoffman, we met with on their dime, a consultant to talk about how we might drop the temperature of our reuse water that will then make it suitable for people like Cal Portland, because right now the temperature coming out of our water system after it's treated is warmer than it has to be for some process like cement. It's also too warm to be put directly back into the Willamette. So we're working through those issues, and the consultant firm is is due to bring us back a report. We've notified Cal Portland what we're attempting to do, so hopefully we'll get another user of the water system, of the reuse water system. And that also helps us in the future, particularly with our DEQ permit about we can't put warm water back in the Willamette because of its impact, potential impact on salmon. Held the series as I do every 2 weeks, with updates and kind of going over work plans, and it's a chance for directors to kind of tell me what they're working on and any issues that overworked or conflicting priorities and things like that to work on. Attended the Bypass Park Committee. Also one that's, for some that particularly care, is that Public Works, and this is Jay and really some of our staff at the maintenance yard, Russ and Vance, have been working on potential reuse for the villa oaks that we had, and we've now, the next step for us is it's been cut. The wood has been cut into large chunks. It needs to be dried. It'll probably be a full year that it will take to dry, and then that wood is available in planks or other things that we can reuse and recognize the kind of value and tradition of those oaks and things around the city. So there's more to come. We're also working with 2 other private groups. I think their name is the Sawdust Group out at the Senior Center and Anvil Academy, and then a group that's actually organized by one of our IT staff. So a lot of people are getting involved, and we'll be able to make the good use of the wood. TLT Marketing Subcommittee, and there's more to come to that about how to deal with the current kind of changes and state of affairs at the chamber, and they're looking on a proposal. Will come back up through the TLT to you. Doug's working that, and we're working with particularly the TLT, the Lodging Tax Committee chair, to try to broker to see a solution with tourism and marketing within the existing framework of the dollars that we have right now. Doug Truman and I are also working on, we've answered we've got clarification from the FAA. Now we're working with the owners of Sportsman's Air Park to answer some questions about, in advance of coming to council, asking you to consider an application to the FAA for the purchase of development rights by the FAA. And there are some real technical things about ownership and maps, but the bottom line is that if we go and it will be an uphill battle because this grant has only been awarded once in the last 20 plus years, but if we got it, then the issue is if the airport they go bankrupt and they ever cease operations there, the city would assume responsibility. How can we protect the interests of the city and still participate in the grant? So that's what we're working on now before it comes to you. There's several projects in the downtown with the Downtown Coalition that we're working on them. Today we received the appraisal for the Butler property, so we now have that, and so we anticipate at your next meeting having an executive session, share that appraisal information to you, and ask you for guidance about the next step in potentially selling that property and under what kinds of conditions. Went to the annual awards dinner with the mayor and city attorney for the Council of Governments, working with YCAP, both about their vision for their youth center here that's been operating for a number of years, but also some new initiatives that they're looking at in affordable housing. Doug already mentioned that there's a change at the top of the Elise Hugh, the Housing Authority director, has announced that she's leaving to go to Florida, and so there'll be a position and some change there. We had our emergency management meetings. There was a successful fundraiser, La Sierra, for the police department. This is in the last 2 weeks, and then Friday night there was also Friday night was also a fundraiser for the police at the cultural center. And finally, just side notes, kind of interesting. We Shelley and I continue. We pick up the ballots for the elections and do that part as volunteers. And we also have three Chinese 8th grade students that we're hosting as part of the Fox program. Mayor.
Any questions or comments for the city manager? None appearing. We will then move to council appointments. And I would like to have you consent to my appointment of Mr. John Witchick Jr. for one position that is a result of a resignation to be effective immediately on the Newberg Planning Commission for a term expiring December 31, 2020. And I phrase that as a motion.
So moved.
It is, you phrased it as a motion, okay. Second, all right. Been moved and seconded to consent to my appointment of Mr. John Witchick. Am I getting close? Very close, thank you. For the vacant position on the Newberg Planning Commission, and that would be effective immediately. If you approve of this, John will be sitting with the commission later this week. So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Question's been called for. Is there no further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. Mr. Witchick, would you introduce yourself? And thank you for your willingness to join us on our planning commission. Thank you for being here. No, we thank you for being here. Thank you. We appreciate it very much. You're welcome to stay, or you may leave. All right, very good. With that, we then move to the area of public comments, and this is a section of the agenda that provides an opportunity for our citizens to address the council on matters relevant to the city and regarding items on the consent calendar, but not on any specific items which there will be future deliberation by the council this evening. This section of the agenda is for a maximum of 30 minutes, could be extended, and I would like to remind all citizens who have signed up to speak that each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the council. Also, any collective comments by an individual under the comments section will be limited to a total of 5 minutes. Persons wishing to speak to the council must complete the public testimony form, which I have here, and give it to the city recorder. When invited to speak, the individual shall identify themselves by their name. Address is not required. Turn on the microphone. And it is asked that any request for information that a speaker makes, be made in writing and presented to our city recorder to be forwarded to myself and the council. And we will then distribute it to the staff. Council requests that all persons in attendance avoid contact that is unreasonable and disruptive. And with that, we have a couple of people that have signed up to speak to us. I have a Mr. David Walls, and he has given me some information that he wanted the council to have, so I will distribute this to the council. Mr. Walls, your testimony is going to be read from this, or is it in addition to this, or gives clarification?
This is for your consideration, and I just want to make one extra
All right.
comment.
If you would identify yourself, you may begin.
Okay. Right button, very good. My name is David S. Wall. My address is P.O. Box 756, Newberg, Oregon, 97132. I've been studying your TLT process, and I'm very familiar from the former jurisdiction that I hail from, with a much larger funding issue than what we have here, and also structural issues. So I came up with some ideas that I hope will be of great utility to you as you look and disperse your monies for the benefit of the city of Newberg and not to benefit ancillary businesses that are outside the city of Newberg with no chance whatsoever of conferring a public benefit to the city of Newberg or anybody else for that matter. There's some problems that I looked at the rating criteria. I don't know how it was how they came up with it. I think that needs to be reviewed. There's one issue of voting, and this is on the Wolves and People Vines to Steins Trail. Now, there's two sets of votes in here that really demand a look. One is from Councilor McKinney, who has zeroed out all his criteria, and the other one is a former member, I suppose, because of the Chamber's decision. Ms. Kelsch gave a maximum award of points. Now, this is an indicator to me of a flawed rating system, but I won't go into those details. But when you look at it, that just doesn't happen unless there's something else going on. And so you really need to look at your criteria for this. You also need to look into whether or not first of all, how these people are appointed to this committee to begin with. What type of backgrounds do they have, fully vetted publicly, financial documents and whatnot. That would be very helpful. And you have to deal with, when you're investing large sums of public money, now it is public money, all right? You say that it's not taxpayer money, but I reject that argument because City of Newberg is a corporation. Your principals are the corporation. The citizens are the shareholders, and you're doing their business or your business in their name, and it is public money. So how you go about it and how you give it out, there are two items that you should be very, very concerned with yourself. Now, in the jurisdiction I hail from, the gifting or gambling with public money is a felony. I don't know what it's like up here because I haven't researched it yet. Now, in closing, you really, this is just ideas for you. For you, Mr. City Manager, with reference to your discharge from your water pollution control plant, I have knowledge of water pollution control plants, a lot larger than anything around the state of Oregon. Now, you might talk to your engineers about a metered flow, equilibration basin, serpentine tanks, solar refrigeration units. That might help you. Also, what might help you is the impetus to discuss a reclaimed water project, because unfortunately, Oregonians want to mimic the San Francisco Bay Area with reference to your housing and development philosophies, and it's disturbing because you're destroying farmland, which is Oregon's only real economic sector. I mean, you can think you have Intels or anything like that, but all this is transitory. Oregon's main economy is agriculture, and cities all throughout Washington County are destroyed. Portland is a mess. And now when I look at Newberg and McMinnville and the county's growth projections, rest assured, I'm 63. I do not want to be 65 and be in Yamhill County. And I have the financial wherewithal to take care of that. And in the meantime, I want to be helpful to you because I'm an anomaly. I can deal with a variety of government issues as if I was born to them, primarily because I've been studying for many years, writing letters. More letters than anybody else in the history of the jurisdiction I hailed from. So I thank you for giving me that moment of encouragement. So with that, God bless all of you. And it looks like my prayer for a comfortable chair has not been met. So I will take my disabled self somewhere else.
Thank you, Mr. Wall. Appreciate it. Rebecca Wallace, please. And you had a handout that I think you wanted to share with the council.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. This is just an information.
Please identify yourself.
Oh, my name is Rebecca Wallace, and I'm with Family Pet Partners and Lost and Found Pets of Newberg, Dundee, Oregon. And I'm just here to give you an update on the services that we provide Newberg and our, I don't know, you call it a brother city, I guess, Dundee. So I will read this. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm here today to share the services that Family Pet Partners offers the community of Newberg in response to a statement made at the last council meeting by Dr. Johnson of Newberg Veterinary Hospital. Yamhill County decided last March that they were going to push animal control back to the municipalities as of July 1st, 2017. It turned into October for municipalities that did not have a solution as to how they would handle their animal control. Mary Starrett contacted Chief Casey and asked what the solution was for Newberg because this was happening before 4th of July, and that's a busy dog-at-large date. Chief Casey met with Family Pet Partners and the city manager because we offered a solution to help with the caseload of dog-at-large calls. Family Pet Partners has in effect partnered with the Newberg Dundee Police Department since July 1st to provide assistance with dog-at-large calls, found dogs, missing dogs, and animal complaints. We partner with Critter Cabana to house exotic animals that the police department or FPP comes across. We've had an iguana, a turtle, birds, and Critter Cabana will happily take those in for us until we find the owners. Family Pet Partners is the only organization that receives phone calls to be dispatched by our 911 system to dog-at-large or animal-related calls. We've been called to a scene to take possession of animals when a person has passed away. There were 4 dogs, 4 birds, a turtle, and there was something else. But we took all of those animals and transported them. Newberg Animal Shelter did take the dogs until the next of kin was able to pick them up. One of the items discussed, and we hear quite often, is that Newberg does not have animal control. And I feel this misinformation reflects badly on our police department and our city. We absolutely still have animal control as our police department upholds the city code and ordinances as they are written. Since we do not have a dedicated animal control officer, all of our officers fulfill the duty of animal control when dispatched to do so. They will respond to dangerous dog calls, quarantine dangerous dogs when needed, and refer calls out to Family Pet Partners when it is something that can be handled without them. At times, Family Pet Partners has had to call the police department and request an assist with certain dog-at-large situations. They are readily available to do that whenever we need them. In addition to the service we provide for the city of Newberg at no cost, as all of our volunteers do not get paid, we also offer the following: lost and found services to include holding an animal until owner is found, microchip verification, spay-neuter assistance, microchip implant assistance, medical assistance to those that cannot afford care or in an extreme emergency. Our mission is to help keep pets within their family when they come across unforeseen circumstances. So that fits really well for us. Mental health and domestic violence foster care. We receive calls from Marion County, Polk County, and Yamhill County to foster animals so individuals and families can seek the assistance they need without having to worry about their animals. There is no other organization that provides that service in Marion County, Polk, or Yamhill County. We find solutions for stray and feral cats and work them into our program in Marion County. There is not another organization that takes stray cats in Newberg. However, Newberg Animal Shelter will take them in special circumstances. Family Pet Partners has been operating since 2014. We originate from Marion County and are a registered animal rescue entity in Marion County. We get reciprocity in other counties. We have been operating in Newberg since January of 2017, and we look forward to expanding our services and being able to help the community even more in the upcoming year. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Rebecca? Thank you.
Can I add a little bit more? Sorry.
You're out of time.
Okay.
If it's a written material, the council could accept it, but as far as...
It's just the CAD logs. It's okay.
One catalog?
The CAD that the police department, when they...
You can leave it with the city recorder.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm going to make a slight change on the agenda tonight. The first item we're going to take up is going to be under new business, and we're going to deal with the potential sale of the Newberg Animal Shelter at this time. So I got to get myself caught up here too. We're looking for a motion or a series of motions on a potential sale for the animal shelter. And Joe, you're going to carry this before us, so the city manager will be kicking this off.
So, Mayor and Council.
City manager?
Joe Hannon, your city manager.
Hang on just a minute. Is
Okay.
everybody plugged in? Are we all together? Okay, go ahead.
So in your packet is a request for council action to talk about the potential sale of the Newberg Animal Shelter. There is a description of the background, but basically what this is that I brought to you during the long-range planning process the challenge about finding money to pay for communications. As part of that discussion was to look at all kinds of options, whether it's raising revenues, looking at local option levies, cutting certain services, different kinds of services, or looking at any assets that we had that we might sell that could be used for that. So as part of that discussion, there was the sale of the Butler property across the street, which we now have an appraisal on, and we're going to talk about at your next meeting. And the other one was the portion of the property interest that the city had in the animal shelter, potentially selling that. And so that was a long discussion. It's raised a lot of, concern and angst in the community about it. So after trying to answer some of the questions in and out of the press and here, and in meeting with the animal shelter board and the director and a couple of their board members, I've tried to answer the question because I know it has not come as a question, yes or no, on what you're going to do with the animal shelter. But there's been some public announcements. So tonight's goal is to deal with a potential sale of the property, a right of first refusal, and an opportunity for council to make a statement about the shelter, which have been made, at different times with the press, but now here's a chance if the council wishes to. So basically, what it is that I've ordered an appraisal. We're still out a couple of weeks on that to identify what the value of the building and the property is. We have collected all of the information about what the city spent to build that building, and also all of the money that was raised in fundraising and grants by the volunteer group, the Friends of Newberg Shelter, and others, and most of that came to the city that we used to then build the building. And then after the building was constructed, there were some additional fundraisers and grants to make capital improvements. So that has now all been collected onto spreadsheets that we've shared with the Newberg Shelter. If anyone from the public wants to, we share it with that. We're waiting for a clarification of the Friends of the Shelter has presented us a summary of a little over $100,000 worth of expenditures, which we believe are improvements. In the end, we'll take all those numbers, and when the appraisal come in, we'll compare, this is how much money was spent by all parties, and identify who those are, and this is what the appraisal of the building is, and then bring that back to council. Under Oregon law, when an agency like us, like the city, proposes to sell a piece of property, then, and particularly in this property, you have to have a public hearing. You make public notice, invite people to come in, and as part of that public hearing, we state, why are we selling the property? And what are we looking at as the potential use of that property? Again, this is made in a public hearing. We then present a document that says what we believe the value is. Sometimes you get real estate, realtors' statements of value. In this case, we'll have an appraisal. And then that appraisal will be presented out to the public. And then you can make whatever decision that you wish what happens to the property. Now, one of the things of so what's happened is the Friends of the Shelter has expressed a desire. First, most of them would say, well, we hope that you wouldn't sell it at all, just continue on with a contract. But if you do decide to sell it, a couple of things. One is we want to make sure that all of the donations and the fundraisers that came in, that those would be recognized, so the city wouldn't just take those and go to pay for the communications or anything else. So it's recognition of that, and that's why we've collected all the data and put them out where everyone's going to be able to see who is given what to the shelter. And then the other one is that here at a council meeting, one of the representatives of the board asked for, well, if you do sell it, we'd like the right of first refusal. If you think about it, a right of you to award a right of first refusal is actually giving a form of a potential property interest in it. So that most appropriately, and there's some questions in what the law is, but to be very transparent and safe, the appropriate place is at a public hearing. So what I am recommending to you and what's in the motion or the memo tonight are several. Two are statements about your intent, and they can be taken as all three motions or independently. So it's about what intent you have for the shelter and any sale. And then the other one is for you to direct that we have a public hearing set for March 19th. So the recommendation to you, the three that are in the memo, is that the first is that the City Council declares its intent that the Newberg Animal Shelter building continue to be used as an animal shelter. So if it's sold, your intent, which you'd also, my recommendation to you is that you say at the public hearing also, that this is to continue on as an animal shelter. Second, that the city recognize the value of the donations and grant revenues that have been contributed by the Newberg Animal Shelter Friends, which is a 501c3, to construct and improve the Newberg Animal Shelter if the shelter is sold. So that is part of the final accounting for how money would be distributed, is that you recognize this. Now, in the public hearing, there'll be an opportunity that there were a few people that donated that may or may not have associated themselves with the Newberg Animal Shelter, but they still gave money to the city. So as much as we can figure out who those are, that'll be on the sheet and give you an opportunity to say these people or these groups gave the city money to go just for this, for the animal shelter. So we'll have those all listed and share them both with the press and with Newberg Animal Shelters and anyone else that cares. And then finally, third recommendation is that a public hearing be set for March 19th and that we give the notice. We expect that by March 19th, the reason, well, why would you set it way out in March? Well, first, it's our own process to make sure it gets all the staff reports done. But in this case, it's also that the appraisal will be completed by then. So the appraisal could be, if we're really good, done in 2 or 3 weeks, but that'll give us time to then present, and very public in that one.
Councilor Bacon?
I'm a little confused with number 2.
Okay.
So are you saying, well, I can read it one of 2 ways, that we believe that the donations and grants that were received were for the Newberg Animal Shelter Friends, and that money would go back to them? Or are you saying that the money that was donated to build an animal shelter, and the money, no matter who purchases it, would get that discount based on that assumption?
Okay. What I'm saying by that one is if and when the building is sold, there'll be some proceeds of that. Mm-hmm. And so this is an attempt to say that we know that some of the money that was raised, a large chunk of it, was raised by the Newberg Shelter Friends, a specific group, and that was given to the city. So we want to recognize that. And then the second one is that there were some people that may or may not have been associated with them, but we know their donations were intended to go to the city to build the shelter. And so what we will do is have all those listed along with the cost. Now that's the public hearing portion of it, where then you'll decide what happens. If there's only one bidder, for example, then it's probably a no-brainer. If you get, if you get one bidder, it's likely you'll have one choice to make: sell or not sell and distribute it. If you get 2, then you may have a decision to make. What I want to do is to present you all the information, you to see that and judge it for how you would make the distribution.
Follow on?
Yes, please, because I'm still not sure that
Okay.
because my intent, if we are saying that if we vote yes on number one, so it will always be an animal shelter. Number two recognizes that this community donated to build an animal shelter. So no matter what animal shelter takes it over, they are going to get, the community's going to get credit for the money that they donated.
I'm open for that. That's what the council would like. My goal in doing this is to present you and say that that's what I'm going to do, of all of the sources of information and all of the people who we can identify donated money. And it may be a moot question if you only have one group that wants to purchase the building.
Councilor Johnson?
I'm a little confused about process, so just
Okay.
bear with me, please. And none of these are meant to be rude questions, just wanted to kind of know how this works. So the first question I would have is, do we have an idea, without the appraisal, how do we know that all of these machinations and negotiations and all the time that went into this is at the end of this thing going to be worth the trouble? Do we have a sense of what we're...
We don't.
Okay. Follow up?
Follow on.
Number two would be that if we don't know the cost benefit for selling this property, then for me, well, what would, I'm trying to figure out the best way to put this. Let me shift. How, to follow on Councilor Bacon's comment, just to give you a hypothetical, let's say the XYZ animal shelter management company comes in and says, we'll give you $5 million for the whole shebang. What happens to that money, the community and the Friends of the Animal Shelter put in? Do we just scratch them out a check from the proceeds, or what does that look like?
So first, that's the value of the public hearing, and the value of the time between now and we get this public hearing is we get some more certainty on the value. So you're right, it's all theoretical. We could have a situation where the value of the property is less than the amount that the city put in to contribute to buy the land and construct it, plus the money that the shelter. So what do? If that happens, then we'll sit and we'll have some alternatives for you. So I don't know that. So like, would this be a big hassle? Why did you go down that road? Because the purpose of this exercise at the starting of it was to see if there were some resource the city had that could go towards the communication. So if it comes out and the value of the property, let's say, is $500,000, and we've spent $1 million to put it together, recommendation maybe in that case, well, why sell it? Maybe, but I don't know that until we get the appraisal, and so that's what would happen. Now, if you have a situation that we've put $100,000 into it and it's valued $1.5 million, then between now and that hearing, we'll lay out some options. That could be something like, if all of the private donations equaled 70% of the project and the city had 30%, one alternative will be to apply that to the value of the whatever we get in proceeds. So if, let's say it's $1 million, and it's not exactly this, but let's say the donations were $700,000 and there was $300,000 that came out of the city. And if it comes out, and so it's a 70-30 split, right? If it comes out that it's worth 1.5 million, all the expenses have been taken care of, then we would take, one alternative would take that entire option and place it against that. The other part that we don't know, in that same kind of scenario, is that this, let's say it's 700,000 again, and 500,000 of that is clearly identified as coming from right through the Newberg Friends to the city. Handed a check, or they went and got a grant to it. Well, then you credit that. What do you do with the other $200,000? Well, that's the process to identify people, and we might ask them if they come in. My guess is some might have passed away. We won't know that. You're going to be presented and get to make that very difficult decision of what you do with those funds. Now, I do not expect that an outside group is going to come in here, but during the public hearing, and you can say it tonight or at the public hearing, you can have a preference, which is staff's preference. I didn't put it into here, but glad to articulate that tonight. And there is the preference is that the money raised locally stays local. So let's say the Humane Society of Albany, New York, wants to begin operations in Oregon, and they put in a bid for it, and the Newberg area friends or the shelter friends put in a bid. That's where you'll state your preference on what your goals are at the meeting. My preference, but it's truly a policy one, and then the attorney will jump in to say, can you make decisions about that aren't just based on a dollar amount, which you can, but then that will be articulated as an option. So part of that is get the appraisal, see where it goes, then come to you and say, at a public hearing, do you want us to go out and advertise for it? Do you want this as a sufficient hearing? Do you need additional information to try to clarify it?
Follow on. In your appraisal, is there a limitation in there that this property will remain an animal shelter, or is it being appraised as just a piece of property with a building on it?
What we've done to get a value is that we've asked, what's the zoning? So this is the instruction back to the person who's appraising. If I'm not saying it right, then Doug, you want to describe it? He's better describing the instructions we gave to the appraiser.
So Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So the instructions to the appraiser was to appraise this property as an industrial piece of property with a building that's on that industrial property with no restriction. So it's a fair market comparison of one transaction for industrial land versus comparables for other industrial land. The issue about what's come up in front of council about limits to as an animal shelter, that would be discussed as part of the process the city manager is laying out for that hearing on March 19th.
So our goal is to find a value of the property. Yours is going to be for the future use or why you're selling it. What's the use? That's really set out in statute that says when you start selling things, what do you want it to go for?
Follow on. When is the current lease with Friends up? Do we know that?
June of this year.
June of this year?
I think or probably July 1.
Okay. Another follow on, real quick.
Follow on.
And in your discussions with the Friends group, is their preference to renew the lease or is it to purchase the property?
Well, their preference is that they continued on with the lease and there's no discussion with the sale of the property. That's their preference. But as you heard here, if the city is going to sell it, then they would like the right of first refusal to purchase the property. Of course, since we don't know how much it's going to be, because we haven't got an appraisal, so you haven't set with appraisal, it's kind of like, yes, it's we want to be in line, and we would like recognition of all of the money that people in the community have put into it.
Thanks.
Councilor Essen?
I wrote this out for myself to try to understand it. And the first thing I kind of wondered is, the city's got a real problem here because we need the money. We need to sell whatever we can sell and get the money. And, but the first part of the problem is we've worked with a group, and in our integrity, what we said to them is, we're going to take your money and buy and use it, and we're going to make an animal shelter out of it. And so, thus, the first part of this, which says it's still going to be an animal shelter, so, we maintain our integrity. But they said then if we go to the next part, where they actually did it and they're involved in it, and now they're operating, our credibility is kind of at stake here, because now not only have they done that, they've stepped in when we backed out. And at this point, we have a problem if we next time want to do something with anybody else, because the partnerships are going, and wait a minute, we buy into your program, we go out and raise the funds, and then you decide you want to step out of it, and we say, okay, we're in. And you go and we do it. So then I think you're trying to address this, and so that's where it's going to be an animal shelter. And so if we're going to sell it, we're going to give, I guess, whoever was our partner in this thing to start out with, first right of refusal. And because what I heard was that we want at least the first right of refusal. We may still work with you, but we need some time. So would you at least extend our lease and give us some time to come up with the money? And we're the only people that you were going to be working with, essentially, and we want to work with you still. So it makes it the city's in a tough spot, and the animal friends are in a tough spot, because now that they've stepped up and they're still operating it, then are they going to have to compete? And I guess that was the question that Denise was asking. Are we just dealing with, we've only got one person that we're dealing with here, essentially. It's saying, we'll still hang in here with you, but, give us an extension on our lease and give us some time to figure out where we're going to come with this money. And we didn't even, it looked like there's a couple $300,000 potential here that would have to be come up with, and then the city can do what they want to do, which is completely back out of apparently the pet business, even though I think we have some liability if we don't take care of the animals that are out there roaming around doing whatever they're doing. So I think the city manager is doing the best he can do here with all the parameters we've given him, but it's going to be difficult if we're going to say, no, if somebody from New York came in here, we want to give the 600, for instance, the animal friend says, no, we just don't want to do it. We walk away. Now we're not selling the property. If you know anything about real estate, if you sell it as a commercial piece of property, it's got a certain value. You sell it as a pet, the only thing it can be is, a pet center, then it's got another value, because there's limited need for those kinds of things, and if it's going to have to be that, you're not going to get any money you'll have your one offer here, and maybe there's another. That's what I was asking. Was there another group out there somewhere that was willing to step in here? The city manager told me no, there's not at this point. So we have to be realistic whether or not we would have to deal with basically this one group, and they seem to still be willing to fight and work with us on this, but I don't see that there's a lot of money here that we're going to pick up. And that, I guess, we won't know until we get this appraisal in, and we can make a decision at that time but, and I don't know how I'd vote against this, because what we're doing is exactly what the animal friends ask, is, okay, if you're gonna do this, give us a first right of refusal. So, okay, that's what we're being asked to do tonight, is give them the first right of refusal. So I have no problem voting for this, but I don't want to go down this path at all. I just assume I don't see the money that we were hoping was there is kind of, we've got new facts that we weren't dealing with when we thought about selling this to start out with. But we put a lot of effort in it. We've got the appraisal coming up, and I don't know where we can go for here, but this is not the best thing in the world. So I'm not going to oppose it, because it's what we asked them to do, but I don't see how this is going to really work out.
Councilor Bacon.
So I'm still struggling, because here's the thing. I donated, I donated, I didn't donate to the Friends. I donated to build an animal shelter. Yes, my money went through them, but I wanted an animal shelter. But that is at a time when it was actually our animal control, and it was a function of government. Animal shelters are not a function of government. So that's where we run into problems. But I want there to be an animal shelter. And I donated for an animal shelter. But I don't really care who runs it or who profits from my donation, as long as there's an animal shelter. So if the Animal Shelter Friends gets the credit for my donation, but another organization comes in, if we're saying it has to be an animal shelter, they should also get the benefit of my donation, because I wanted an animal shelter. So there's that. If that is not the case, then I don't care what that building is, right? I mean, I donated it, so you write a check for $600,000 to the Animal Shelter Friends. That's not what I wanted. I wanted an animal shelter. So I'm really, if we're not giving the credit to any animal shelter, it makes no sense to say it has to be an animal shelter, in my opinion, because it's kind of what people donated for an animal shelter to be built.
Mayor.
City Manager.
So you have some options. First, I said there can be 3 independent recommendations. You can vote on each one of those. If there's a question about number 2, and I'll go back to Councilor Esten. If it's a question about number 2, an alternative to that is that you direct staff to present at the time of the public hearing a detailed listing of all of the funds that have been donated and known, donees or donors for those. And then it's a city facility. And like anything, you're the ultimate stewards of that. So you'll make that tough decision, whatever it is, of the distribution of money, if there is some. So we don't have to guess on one. Let's get the appraisal first, get all of the expenses and the donations received, and have them as a list and see if there's money. Is there a profit in selling this property? One thing that was missing out of Councilor Essen's discussion is, well, do they have to go out and raise money? We've been circumspect of naming the foundation because they don't choose to do that. But there has been, and we've reported this all along, there is another player here that I have met with and the animal shelter has met with that indicates they're willing to help with the financing of this property. So if the property, and it won't be, but if it was $5 million, which it won't, at whatever dollar amount, this other foundation has been meeting with the Friends and said, under certain conditions that they work through between the two, they are willing to participate in the potential person that would take the city out, assuming the property and the value of all this is worth more than what the appraisal is. If the cost, if the money that's been raised, is what, less than what it's valued at, you'll get to make that decision as a steward by having all of the expenses and who has put the money in what kind of proportion. And you can use that. That's what I'll recommend to you, but you can use that as a measure. But you may get to that point of saying, wow, if there's no money, if the city's portion of the contribution, like the land, and it's detailed in the staff report, if that's so little, if this property was sold by giving credit to anyone, the donors that are unidentified or the animal shelter, you could theoretically say, okay, it didn't meet that goal of trying to get funds for the communications, and you might direct, okay, you can decide, you can say, renegotiate another contract with all that. Now, that begs the question of, is the city's role to be in this kind of animal sheltering? Should we be there to start with? Because even over and above the capital money that's put in there, there is some, it's not a lot, but there are ongoing costs at the shelter, and they're detailed in there. So if there's no real capital for us to pull out, but you make a decision as a budget decision that says, okay, we may still want to sell this property and then stop the ongoing expenses of the utilities and some maintenance stuff, insurance, you can choose that. Or you can renegotiate a contract and still take those things out. But that's why you'll have a public hearing of presenting all this, so we don't have to guess of what it's valued at and who has put in all of the money. We'll identify that. And by that time, maybe the outside funder will choose to identify their interest and participation.
Councilor Johnson.
The ongoing costs, I'm assuming these are
Say
annual.
again?
The ongoing costs
Yes.
that's outlined in the staff report,
Yes.
the $9,043, is that a year or a month?
No, it's a year.
That's a year? Okay, cool.
Sorry.
I was looking at that and I was like, it was too expensive, but then I didn't think it was enough for annual, so sorry. What? Yeah, there's no water. Is that the municipal service statement?
Yes,
Oh,
so
okay.
we haven't broken out, but we know
Okay.
approximately with it. These are the hard costs that we know.
And then one last
You
one.
have more follow-ons?
Just one more.
All right.
Okay. Actual questions, not discussion, if I might make an editorial comment. My last question is, where did the decision, how did you come to the decision to appraise it as industrial with a building on it versus an animal shelter? Because it would seem to me that from the discussions we've had as this group, we've always said it's going to be an animal shelter. And if we're not appraising it as such, it seems to me that there's some discrepancies there that I'm not entirely comfortable with.
So we go to highest and best use, okay? And so at least on a theory and a decision that you could have, and the reason is to get this information so that you could have this if you made a decision, even though I'm not recommending this. But in theory, if it was worth $2 million, let's say, as an industrial property, and you had some amount that was contributed by Animal Friends and all the donors, one choice you could have is you could sell that property, part of your discussion, you sell it, if you had a buyer, sell it for $2 million, take the proceeds and divide it. Now there's in whatever formula that you use. So you could take out the city and animal and the friends or some donor group, whatever that's identified, could have now, maybe they put in $700,000 and they get $1.2 million to go replace it and build another shelter. Now, are there real practical problems with that? Of course there are. We have a limited amount of space that's zoned for a shelter. But that could be one option for you. Clearly, if you appraise it as, and that's the highest and best use, so that's your value that you have. Now, you're making a different decision if you do this tonight or at any time and say, no, the only thing I'm going to use this for is a shelter. Absolutely. Well, there are no comparables. So what do you do as a value of a property like that?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Olson?
And it's kind of a student of government, and having lived in different areas, it's not true that government is not a function of government. It used to be a function of government, and most of the time it's handled by the county. The county sheriff usually handles this, and what has happened is our county sheriff has decided not to do it. Now, apparently it is an option. I know back in Texas we didn't have animal control, so when I got the wild boar in my backyard, or the 2,000-pound bull that happened to be running wild, or maybe the goats that showed up at the back door, or even the snapping turtle, and there was nobody to call. I mean, you get out there and do the best you can do. We don't have quite those issues, but they didn't pay for it, and we would have problems if these issues. I mean, feral cats are big issues, and so we need this service, and so that's why we have to look at it more than it's not a government function. But I think it's amazing, and this city depends on our volunteers, and I'm really thrilled that we have this organization in place. I didn't donate for the building, but I had it in my budget to send them money every month and take down the cat food and this and that, because I want the cats taken care of and the dogs taken care of, because you can't, and if they need kitty food or whatever, because they've got a bunch of kittens to take care of, I don't know, you want them out running around in your backyard, and you don't. So this is really for the community, and I think they're doing a great job. Whether or not they're doing a job, and they seem to be willing to keep doing it. So we have to look at that side of it too. But yeah, we do have to pay for the communication system. So I think we don't stop in the middle here. Let's go forward, or at least I would vote for that, and see where it comes out.
I just have one more comment, and then I'll be done, I promise.
Councilor Bacon?
They do not take feral cats. It says so on their website. Only if they're pregnant. They're full now. So there's a difference between the function of government and taking care of local animals. Rebecca was out last night chasing down a pit bull that was scaring some lady. That's the function of government with a police officer. Taking feral cats from California and bringing them up here is not a function of Newberg government. That is an animal shelter, which is fine, and they're great. I love animal shelters. Not a function of government, and not working for Newberg animals. So that's very different. Yeah, their website says that. So just to keep in mind the two different, what a function of government is and what a shelter does is not necessarily taking care of feral cats out of your backyard. And I'm done now.
My turn? Councilor Essen mentioned it in one way, city manager mentioned it another, and I would like, if I may, to bring the city attorney into it. I was hearing that right now, without a public hearing, and because we are dealing with certain requirements within state statute on the distribute or the sale or exchange of real property that the city owns, that we cannot accept prior to that hearing a right of first refusal. Would you give me clarification on that?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Truman Stone, City Attorney.
So the sale of real property by a city is governed by ORS 221.275, and so we're talking real property, so we're talking land and buildings, not personal property, which would be everything else. And the statute specifically has requirements prior to sale of real property, including publication in the paper, having a hearing, having people have the opportunity to comment both orally and in writing. But then there's an interesting component of the statute that talks about sale includes a lease option agreement under which the lessee has the right to buy the leased real property in accordance with the terms of the agreement. So we aren't exactly in that situation here. We do have a lease with the Animal Shelter Friends, and now we're talking about giving them an option to purchase, and that option being the first option in front of anybody else. Although that's not in the lease itself. So the city manager made a comment that the law, that our facts may not line up exactly with the law as it's written, but I think if you look at the spirit of the law and what we're actually fundamentally trying to do here, my advice was that a right to purchase property is a property right, and that it shouldn't be given without going through those should not be given without going through those formalities. And even if that's a position just in the abundance of caution, I think there's a benefit to the community and to the citizens in having that kind of transparent public process.
A little more clarification for this old fellow, if I may. You mentioned a lease option. Is that consistent or contrary to ORS 221.725?
In that statute, a lease option is equivalent to a sale. So if this council were to approve a lease with an option of purchase, you would also have to go through the formalities of holding a hearing and publication.
Okay, thank you. That's the clarification I needed. And there was something came up about comps on the value of the property. And don't we have other animal shelters within the state that have some real value? And I say real meaning real estate value.
Again, Truman Stone, I'm not a property appraiser, but in 25 years of practicing law, I've looked at lots of those. The appraisers are...
I'm looking at Wasco County has a shelter.
Sure.
Marion County has a shelter, just as two to start with.
But an appraiser needs to look at comparable sales, not just other existing facilities. And so I'm not aware of any animal shelter in the state that's been sold. Now, there could be some that I'm not aware of, but just because there's other locations that have those facilities, that's not sufficient for an appraiser to do a sales comparison approach in determining an opinion of value. And city manager mentioned the Butler property, and we just were looking at that appraisal today. And so
which property?
The Butler property.
Butler, thank you.
So to find comparable sales for that vacant lot, there were, I think, 2 in Newberg, and then the appraiser had to go outside of our community and, first look at McMinnville and such. But then to find an additional comparable, they had to go well out of Yamhill County. And so even to find comparables for a property like the Butler property is difficult in the market if you don't have sales. And the sales, I can't remember what their time limitation is, but I think it's something like 6 months to be a valid comparable sale. So it's not like they can even go back and say 4 years ago a shelter in Roseburg was sold and use that as a comparable. And again, I'm not an appraiser, so that's my memory of what appraisers have told me, so don't hold me to that. But under the appraisal standards, the comparable sales have to be within a defined period of time. And so one of the concerns we had when we were having those internal conversations was if we hired someone to appraise it as an animal shelter, it may be money spent with no result. So to appraise it just as a building would be the place to start. I think the city could ask the appraiser then to assign some sort of discount to that real market value if there was a deed restriction on the use of the building. But you need to start with the comparable sales to figure out what the actual value of the property is.
Mayor, can I respond to your other counties that have animal shelters? Those other counties, the only way you come to a semblance of value is like an insurance policy on it. Because other public buildings, they're not appraised unless they're in some kind of an enterprise activity. So even having a shelter with the sheriff's department in Wasco County doesn't assign a value to them. They will do things like we do when we try to figure out approximate values of what something is. We have an insurance policy, and that's typically can be for some of the structure, but for the things that are inside. So even having them at another place is kind of little value, I think.
Thank you. Matt?
So I've heard what everybody has said, and I'm trying to go back through and really look at what the recommendation is. And number two is that the city recognizes the value of the donation and grant revenues contributed if the shelter is sold. The only thing we're trying to pass tonight is a motion that we're declaring our intent that the city is going to recognize the value. It's not going anywhere at this point. And that there'll be a public hearing. So as much as I appreciate talking about the animal shelter all night, we have a lot of agenda to go over tonight. I just want to wrap it back up because I think what we're trying to do is everybody's on the same page. We want an animal shelter in Newberg. So, so I'm going to entertain the idea of passing this motion so we can move onward and upward.
I concur with Councilor Murray with one. I think we still need paragraph 1 in there too.
Yes.
You addressed 2 and 3, but I think we need 1.
Sorry.
Question with the city attorney: does by our adopting or passing a motion that contains language in paragraph number 1, does that constitute a deed restriction or not?
I don't believe it would.
Thank you. That's all I needed. We can build on it, but that is not in itself. Good. Thank you. Matt, you want to
I'm looking to
take a charge and run at it?
Approve the motion for the potential sale of the Newberg Animal Shelter, including line 1, 2, and 3, per the recommendation from the city manager.
Been moved and seconded that the city council approve the following motion, that the city council declares its intent that the Newberg Animal Shelter building continue to be used as an animal shelter, that the city recognize the value of the donations and grant revenues contributed by the Newberg Animal Shelter Friends and ASF to construct and improve the Newberg Animal Shelter if the shelter is sold, and that a public hearing on the sale of the animal shelter be scheduled for March 19. That is the motion before you. Is there any further discussion?
Yep.
Council Johnson?
I'm not going to be supporting this because I know exactly how this is going to be portrayed on social media and in the paper. This is going to be the first step to selling the animal shelter. I will bet money on that right now. I personally think this is not a great first move for us in that we don't even know what the appraisals are yet. We're not even sure if this is worth the trouble. And we are itching to get a whole lot of public comment between now and March 19th. So keep those emails fired up because you're going to be getting a lot of calls.
Counselor Essen?
Yeah, I would move to table the motion, and wait till we, to a date certain, until we know what the appraisal is.
Second.
Oh, my goodness. It takes precedent. It's been moved and seconded to table this discussion and to a date certain, that being when we receive an estimate. That's as close as the date that we get the appraisal. And the first council meeting following the appraisal. That's the motion before you. Is there any further discussion, any understanding? Council Johnson, you understand?
Unless, I'm just speaking for myself under discussion. The reason I want to do this is because unless there is some amazing windfall that comes from that piece of property, I do not see this worth the effort of selling the animal shelter.
You don't see what?
I don't see this worth the effort. The amount of political capital and the amount of staff time and the amount of grinding of teeth that is going to go on over this, unless that appraisal comes back at, I'm going to say 2.5 million plus, it is not worth our time. That's my position. That's why I want to table this and find out what the appraisal is. If the appraisal comes back and we're going to make like 250 grand on this, I don't think it's nearly worth the cost of the public goodwill that has gone into that building and gone into that program that we have slowly abandoned. Where it's not worth the 250,000.
Question's been called for. Is there any further discussion? You have a question? Oh, let's do a division of the House.
That's what I was waiting for. Okay. So the motion is to table the motion before you. Counselor Essen? Counselor Bacon? Counselor Corey? Counselor Murray? Counselor Johnson? Mayor Andrews?
Yes.
And I have that down as a date certain following the first meeting, following when we receive the appraisal.
Yes.
Correct. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your patience. We will now move back to the agenda, and we will go to continued business. And we will be now looking at the CalPAC utility adjustment. And this is a motion.
We skipped over the consent calendar.
Say what?
We skipped over the consent calendar.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry.
My minutes are very valuable.
That's my error. That's, the mayor's messed up on that. We missed the consent calendar. So I'm going to move back to the consent calendar. No, we did do the consent calendar. We had Mr. Walls.
Public comment.
Oh, the consent. Councilor Corey?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the consent calendar.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar, Resolution 2018-38, and council minutes. Any further discussion? Question's been called for. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. Consent calendar is adopted. I do not know where I was. Thank you. Appreciate your patience. Now, to continued business, CalPAC adjustment. And you have before you a motion to approve a credit in the amount of $645.54 to Cal Portland for municipal services account. And this is based on a leak adjustment credit. With that, Caleb, you want to bring us up to date?
Sure. Caleb Lippard, Assistant Finance Director. At the January 2nd council meeting, a recommendation was given to make a motion to approve a credit in the amount of $14,746.76 to Cal Portland's Municipal Services account. This motion was given per the request of Cal Portland Management, requesting a write-off of calendar year 2016 charges because we had an error in our system and did not charge them for that year. Since then, we have assessed those charges to their account. I was directed to go back and renegotiate the credit amount, and with that, I presented a leak adjustment to Cal Portland in the amount of $5,645.54, and they did not have a different proposal for that, so I am asking council to make a motion to approve this leak adjustment in the amount of $5645.54.
Questions or comments from the council? Pleasure of the council. Councilor Bacon?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the leak adjustment in the amount of $5,645.54.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the credit amount of $5645.54 to Cal Portland's Municipal Services account. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Bacon?
I do want to, it seems like a lot of money, but I think at some point, some of this was our fault as well. And that is why I'm willing, the original amount was just way out of control. But because some of it is our fault, you can't tell you have a leak if you're not getting charged for your water. So, that part of that lies on us. So I am thankful, Caleb, that you were able to come back with this. Thank you.
Any further discussion? The question's been called for. There being no further discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. The motion carries.
Thank you.
And with that, we will now move to the next item, which is an ordinance adopting the legal description of the city limits. This is the second reading of the ordinance. We had a legislative hearing. The hearing was closed as of the previous council meeting, and we are now at the at deliberations, so I will invite Mr. Rux to come forward and review, give you a brief update on this. I have received no further communications from anybody on this particular issue, so at this time I see no need to reopen the record or consider that unless a council member so desires. None appearing. Councilor Rux.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So on January 16th, you had the hearing to address the issue of updating the city limit legal description. So we have a provision in the Newberg Charter that requires we're supposed to have an up-to-date city limit legal description. Had not been done since 2000. So this, I think, if I remember right, was like 42 or 43 annexations have occurred. So we hired a consultant through engineering department who wove all of those together and created a new legal description. We ran it through the Department of Revenue in Yamhill County, and they had no comments. You are at your second reading on this ordinance.
Any further questions or comments for staff? Councilor Corey?
I was just going to make a motion.
That'd be fine if there are no further questions for staff.
Make a motion that we approve ordinance number 2018-2821.
And approve
And read by title only. Yes.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 2018-2821 and read by title only. City Attorney?
Ordinance number 2018-2821, an ordinance adopting a new legal description of the Newberg city limits.
Sue?
Sorry.
It is a roll call vote.
Counselor Johnson. Counselor Murray. Counselor Corey. Counselor Bacon. Counselor Essen. Mayor Andrews.
Yes. So it passes 6-0-1, one absent. Thank you. We move to ordinance 28. 22. I think I have these out of order. (2822), which is an ordinance amending the Newberg Development Code to allow for the creation of private streets. Ordinance 2018-2822. And on this particular one, I have two individuals that have signed up that would like to provide some additional testimony as proponents of this particular ordinance. The record has been closed, so I leave it up to the discretion of the council. Do you want to open up the record and allow further testimony or not? Yea or nay? Councilor Bacon?
I say yes.
All right. So that's, you're moving that we reopen the deal. You what? Do you? It does need a second. It does need a second. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
It's been moved and seconded to.
Just wanted to point out, we have two individuals signed up, but we did receive an email as well. So
I would get to that.
Okay, all right, just checking.
You have before you a motion to reopen the public hearing on an ordinance amending Newberg's Development Code to allow for the creation of private streets and planned unit developments, PUDs. The question is before you to reopen the hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. We will reopen the hearing, and with that, I will remind you that this is a public hearing, and I will again call for any abstentions, conflicts of interest, or objections to jurisdiction. Are there any? None appearing. Do you want to summarize what we're doing, Mr. Rux, and then we will call on.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So the proposal that's before you that you had your hearing on January 16th was to allow private streets and planned unit developments. So this had went through the Planning Commission, through several meetings, had a thorough and detailed review of the proposal. But what this does is that it could allow private streets and a planned unit development, but it comes with some caveats. One is that it has to have 50 or more dwelling units. Per ORS 94, it has to be a Class 1 community, which requires that it has to have a minimum of 13 lots, so you have to have both, 50 dwelling units and a minimum of 13 lots. Also in the proposal, the Planning Commission looked at the issue of a homeowners association, so it has to be in perpetuity. There has to be a professional management company that manages or assists in managing the homeowners association. There's a provision that they have to give a preliminary parking plan so we can ensure that there's adequate parking for such a project. Other pieces that they have to give us a preliminary reserve study so we can see that they're starting to save funds in order to do maintenance on private streets and common areas. And then they would have to give on an annual basis a reserve study so that we can track and monitor if they are collecting enough funds through the HOA dues in order to pay for maintenance and so forth. At your last hearing, it was also inquired about, well, what happens if they don't? Well, it would be a land use action, so the Planning Commission is the one that approves a tentative plan unit development. Then it's an administrative function for the final PUD, so that's my responsibility. That's to make sure that they comply with all conditions. So there are conditions that come with plan unit developments. Remember, plan unit developments are to provide flexibility. As we stated last month, it was, create walkable communities, make them compact. We've also got provisions in here is that to allow private streets is that the city engineer and the fire marshal have to agree to that. So there's coordination that have to be done with both of those. It does not mean that if a developer proposes private streets in a plan unit development that they get approved. Planning Commission has that authority to either approve it or deny it. They can have conditions. If a development does not comply with the conditions, it can be turned over to code enforcement. So this was the issue on parking. And code enforcement then would deal with the management company and the homeowners association. And if there was still an issue and it was unresolved, is that they could be cited into municipal court. Therefore, the municipal judge would make a decision. So that is a recap of an hour or so of discussion.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Rush at this time? Councilor Murray?
I just wanted to talk about a conversation that I had with Doug, and then I was very not hesitant, but I wasn't sure about how I felt about private streets. Over the weekend, on Saturday and Sunday, I walked about 7 miles. I walked north, not the same day, 2 days, but I walked 3.5 miles around the North College where I live, and that neighborhood back by the park and some of the newer neighborhoods. Then I walked south on Sunday before Super Bowl. We've got alleyways, we've got private streets. They're all spattered throughout the community, and every one that I came across, there was nobody parked in them, and they were clean. And I thought to myself, after asking Doug the questions, basically he just nailed it with his wrap-up, is that there's a lot of rules in here and a lot of things that have to be followed. So I got to believe that this is going to be really good and focus on our council goal of helping provide affordable housing in Newberg.
Thank you. Anybody else? Doug, if you step aside for a moment, we're going to move into the area of public testimony. We have 2 individuals that have signed up that they would like to speak to us on this particular issue. I remind those individuals that their comments need to be limited to 5 minutes, and we start with proponents. And I assume, we have written material too. Okay. Both have signed up as proponents. Are you sharing this 5 minutes, or you each want 5?
Mr. Mayor, we can be very brief with our time. I'm sure we can share this 5 minutes adequately.
Thank you.
So for the record, my name is Andrew Tull with 3J Consulting, representing...
And with you?
Jesse Nemick with JT Smith Companies.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, our primary reason for putting our sheets into the record tonight was we did note that there was an email that was submitted after the close of the record. We wanted to make ourselves available to offer rebuttal testimony to that. And we also thought that if we're going to possibly reopen the record tonight, the council had mentioned the idea of maybe looking at some examples of where private streets have been successful in other developments. So within the packet that's being handed out to you, in the first paragraph or 2, there's a couple of rebuttal comments to the letter that was submitted by Mr. Roger Courier. And then there are a couple of examples, some of them very local, near the airport in Portland, in some of the outlying suburbs of Portland, where private streets have been very successfully created and then managed. And then there's a bit of an example on page 3 of some of the costs associated with one of these communities that does contain a private street system. It's just a small private street system that was used to provide access to a couple of lots that were a bit irregular in shape. But the majority of the HOA is paying $35 a month for maintenance of the natural space in this development, the pathway and lighting, and an additional $3 per month to cover the costs associated with the 4 lots that take access from the private street. Now, as we move further through the packet on page 4, 5, and 6, you can see a couple of developments here that are on a bit larger scale, and some of these my colleague Jesse and I have traveled to. On page 5, this is a development in the Woodlands in Texas. I'll just point to it so you make sure you're on the same page. we've purposefully traveled over the past couple of years to a couple of different communities where people are paying upwards of $1 million per acre for undeveloped residential land. And the way that they make that economical and the way that they make that work is by putting in extremely high quality projects at high densities. These are single-family detached homes. This particular project in the Woodlands, those units built now today sell for more than $1 million per unit. The development itself is served by a very extensive, very well thought out private street network. I would say that what we're considering, what we're contemplating with the property in question here in Newberg is probably not going to sell for $1 million per unit, but we're trying to think about how to provide that density. And one of the ways that you accomplish that is by not thinking of your private street network necessarily as a big network of thoroughfare streets, but you separate the development into pods, and then those pods are serviced almost like an apartment complex would. So it's not like you've got a lot of cross traffic going through there. You're just able to really ramp up the amount of parking that you can provide by providing head-in parking throughout that private street network. It's something that absolutely wouldn't be allowed on a normal public street network, but we're able to get high densities here approaching 16, 17, 18, even 20 units per acre with detached units, and we're also able to accomplish a lot of the open space provision and the parking requirements to make a community like this functional. Having been a student of some of these elsewhere, we've seen how it's done, and we're confident that with this permission in place to use private streets, we're going to be able to accomplish some excellent things through the design of the particular site that we're looking at. And I'll open it to Jesse in case I missed any salient points.
Right, and Jesse, Newberg, so
Be sure and identify yourself. We're recording this.
Yes, my name's Jesse Nemec.
Thank you.
And, to add on to what Andrew said, these private streets, they provide design opportunities. One of the examples I gave in there that Andrew mentioned, it quotes some HOA dues and things like that. It's a good example of a project where you have very irregular geometry due to wetlands and natural resources and things like that, where otherwise you wouldn't be able to get the density. You'd lose 4 lots. You'd lose 10% of the density just because the irregular geometry of the property, and a private street was a good solution. It may not be the right solution every time, but it's something that when used in a PUD, and you're going to get the additional scrutiny of the Planning Commission reviewing it, and all of the other conditions that are laid out, I think it's going to be a very impactful and good way to provide high density. And a lot of times we'll have high density projects without the use of public streets, without an alley. And the very last page of the package shows some examples of high density projects where parking is still a problem. Private streets, private alleys, alley loaded products can actually be a solution to that and provide better parking in high density developments.
Any questions or comments for either one of the gentlemen? You did well. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate your time.
In the area of public testimony, I believe if you have been reading your email, you all received an email from Mr. Roger Courier that has been entered. A copy is given to the city recorder, and that's entered into the record. Is there any further discussion that you want to have at this time while we're talking in the area of public testimony? With that, I'm going to close the testimony portion of that. I invite staff back.
Thank you, Mayor. Doug Rux.
Your summary remarks and your recommendation.
Summary remarks are to adopt ordinance number 2018-2822 as recommended by the Planning Commission and resolution number 2017-335.
You've heard the discussion. You've read the remarks in the, I will assume, the emails, etc. So, Councilor Bacon?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt ordinance number 2018-2822 as recommended by the Planning Commission, resolution number 2017-335, and read by title only.
Ordinance? 2018?
2018.
Yeah, the ordinance and read by title only. You've heard the motion. Is there a second? Been seconded. Murray? It's been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 2018-2822 and read by title only. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, city attorney. Councilor Bacon?
I have just a couple points. Like Councilor Murray said, affordable housing is one of our goals. And I think, if we've read through the packet, we realize they've learned from a lot of mistakes that have been made in the past. And I think because we know better, we can do better. And I think it's also a great opportunity for us to be brave and research for future changes on what street width should actually be. And finally, Pat doesn't have to worry about how to pay for street repairs there.
Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Councilmember Johnson?
As we have heard from Jay over and over, streets start really good, and then they're constantly on a downward slide until you put money into them. And the reason I'm voting for this is because here are some streets we don't have to put money into, number one. Number two, I think, personally, I'm very proud of our planning staff and our planning commission and the types of creative things they come up with. And when I look at this and some of the other, hopefully, affordable housing initiatives we have coming up, I'm really excited about how we can use some of these old tools that maybe haven't worked quite well for communities in the past, and with the citizen involvement and also the great staff we have in place, how we can keep Newberg, but also trying to meet these very realistic goals with the limited amount of property we have to develop. Because let's be honest, we heard tonight, urban growth boundary expansion, we're talking years, not months, and we're not growing any more property. We're pretty hemmed in, and so the other piece of it too is we sit in budget meetings and we hear we need to balance affordable housing with the fact that we're $1.3 million short every year on our budget. And when I hear somebody say, well, these were selling for $1 million, I go, well, heck, that helps our bottom line. That'll raise all boats. So I'm very excited to be supporting this tonight, and I'm really happy that staff brought this forward and continue to look for creative ways to solve multiple problems with simple tools.
Did you? I've been through some of these discussions in the past. I think maybe you might have been through a couple of them on the issues of private streets, narrow streets, etc. And I'm particularly impressed with the qualifiers that are in this particular plan, that it's a planned unit development, and it is a planned unit development. And I sincerely appreciate that, and I think it's a move in the right direction, and I endorse and parrot the comments that came from Councilor Johnson. So I will be voting for this. Any other comments?
Move for the
Edson?
question.
Question has been called for. Any further discussion? This is an ordinance. It is to be read by title only.
Ordinance number 2018-2822, an ordinance amending the Newberg Development Code to allow for the creation of private streets and planned unit developments, PUDs, close paren.
Councilor Essen.
Yes.
Councilor Bacon.
Yes.
Councilor Corey.
Yes.
Councilor Murray. Yes. Councilor Johnson. Yes. Mayor Andrews.
Yes. Measure passes 6-0-1. Thank you very much. Now we will move to Ordinance 2018-2824. This again is a second reading of this ordinance. An ordinance amending the Newberg Comprehensive Plan, Section 4, subsections A and B, to reflect the updated historic and projected population information. This was a legislative hearing. We closed the legislative hearing. I have no requests for reopening the record. So with that, I will ask staff to summarize where we are, and we will then move into deliberation.
Good evening, councilors. Cheryl Keynes, Senior Planner with the City of Newberg. So on January 16th, there was a public hearing to consider the proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan. This is a text amendment only to adopt, actually to amend the population forecasts that are within the comprehensive plan, and that information will be used for future planning, both looking at urban growth boundary issues and also for utilities into the future. At this point, staff has no changes or updates for this amendment, so it's as proposed.
Thank you. You had the question before you. Is there any further discussion, or are there further questions for staff? Councilor Corey?
I'd like to make a motion
You may.
that we approve ordinance number 2018-2824 and read by title only.
Been moved and seconded to adopt ordinance 2018-2824, an ordinance amending the Newberg Comprehensive Plan, Section 4, subsections A and B, to reflect updated historic and projected population information. Is there any further discussion?
Call for the question.
None appearing. I hear a call for the question. There being no further discussion, read by title only.
Ordinance number 2018-2824, an ordinance amending the Newberg Comprehensive Plan, Section 4, subsection A and B, close paren, to reflect updated historic and projected population information.
Sue?
Counselor Johnson. Counselor Murray. Counselor Corey. Counselor Bacon. Counselor Essen. Mayor Andrews.
Yes. Motion passes 6-0-1. And with that, we move to new business, and we have a resolution initiating a comprehensive plan amendment for wastewater master plan update.
Thank you, Mayor.
Rux, well, welcome to the meeting tonight.
Thank you. Doug Rux, your Community Development Director. So this is a proposal in front of you, a resolution to advance forward our wastewater master plan update. So our engineering services department has been working since August 2016 on an update to our wastewater master plan. Last time it had been updated was back in 2007. So Keller Associates was the consultant that was selected to work with the city on this process. We've had several technical advisory committee meetings. We've had a couple of public advisory committee meetings. There are provisions in Oregon administrative rules that your utility plans would have to become part of your comprehensive plan. So you may remember when we went to the water master plan, the transportation system plan, and the stormwater plan. Those were not all referenced in the comprehensive plan in compliance with administrative rules. And so this gives us another opportunity to make sure that we're following the laws correctly. So this proposal would initiate that comp plan amendment process. The steps would be in spring. We believe we'll have a final draft of that plan. Then it would go on to the Planning Commission for a public hearing, legislative public hearing, and a recommendation from them in May or possibly June. And then it would be back in front of you. We're hoping your second meeting in June for a first reading, well, maybe both readings that particular night. That would then put us that we basically got our infrastructure master plans are all up to date.
Questions and concerns? Pleasure of the council. Councilor Bacon.
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt resolution number 2018-3434.
Been seconded. Mr. Murray, to adopt Resolution 2018-3434, a resolution initiating a comprehensive plan text amendment, initiating for the wastewater master plan update. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Essen.
Move for the question.
Question's been called for. I see no further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. None appearing. The resolution is adopted. That's true, but we'll let you get by with that. Catch up on my homework here in just a moment. And the next item we have is an informational item on the 2007 Newberg Water Management and Conservation Plan Review. Go ahead, Joe.
Good evening.
Trying to clean up my mess here.
So Cheryl Keynes, again, senior
A
planner.
little closer to the mic.
Cheryl
Move
Keynes.
the mic closer to you so you're comfortable with it. Thank you.
Okay. So Cheryl Keynes, senior planner, City of Newberg. So in March 2017, it was requested that a schedule be put together to review, so the City Council can review all of the master plans that the city has. And so this was the first time that the 2007 City of Newberg Water Management and Conservation Plan has been brought to you with an update. And so, as you can see, from 2007, it's several years old at this point. And the purpose of this plan is because under Oregon revised statutes, we're required to have such a plan. Couple of reasons is to ensure the efficient use of water resources within the state of Oregon, but also it's a component of the planning that the city does for ensuring the city's water supply over time. And what this plan does, what components are in the plan are, it outlines the city's water sources. It outlines conservation measures that are currently being done by the city and then should be partaken over time by the city. And so one of the other things that it also points out is it outlines a plan for what happens if and when the city ever starts to have insufficient water or there's a large drought. What sort of plan goes into action if that is to happen? But again, most of the plan focuses on conservation. What are the conservation measures that the city is currently doing and plans to do? And since it is from 2007, many of these measures are either still underway or parts of this plan are out of date, and so the city may or may not be doing those measures anymore. Some of those measures include audits, just kind of tracking where does the water go. We take out so much supply, and then how much water ends up back at the wastewater treatment plant, and so what happens to that water, who's using it, and that helps the city then determine how much supply is actually needed. And what we found over time is that people are starting to use less and less water. These audits also help the city to detect problems in the water system. Are there leaks? And so then they can track those down and correct those leaks. And then other things that have been done are improvements to the system, especially the supply system. That helps the city to limit water loss and also helps to better monitor and manage the supply of water that we have. Public education is a big component, just helping people to understand why water conservation is important and how to do that. And so the city helps by putting information out at public events, on the city website. We give away free water conservation kits if anyone is interested in obtaining those. And then recycled water system, that's a big component of basically that water that gets used by the recycled water system for irrigation customers is not coming out of our drinking water system. And so that plays a big role in the amount of drinkable water that is not being used. And right now it looks like up to 500,000 gallons a day of drinking water is not being used because of this recycled water system. So again, as I noted, this is an old plan, and many things have changed about our current water system, and so this plan does need to be adopted because there are parts of it that are no longer relevant. But recently the city adopted a new updated water master plan, and part of that is part of the requirements coming out of that is to update this water management and conservation plan. So the city has, over the next couple of years, the Public Works Department will be looking at updating this plan, but also looking at reviewing the water rights, which these two pieces go hand in hand. It's like you can't do really one without the other. So that's something that's showing up in the city's capital improvements program. So that's the update for the water master plan. Sorry, the water management conservation plan. Yes. Yes.
Is there a requirement that you do this every, like, 10-year cycle to do?
I don't think necessarily there's one, like a schedule that we have to keep, but.
Doug Rux, Community Development Director. It's not a prescriptive in either statute or rule on the 10 years. It's often, it's periodic review was the driver that triggers these master plans, these infrastructure master plans to be done. As I mentioned before to, I think, a number of you, the periodic review program's kind of on hold. And we've had this conversation on the wastewater plan. But about every 10 years you need to do it. So we just finished the water master plan. We'll be finishing the wastewater. So that provides them the opportunity to update this water conservation plan because it really ties between the water master plan and the wastewater master plan because of the reuse component. So we're still on schedule.
Any other comments or questions for Cheryl at this time? Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much. And with that, we move to the council business. And Sue, you have a discussion you want to have with us?
I have two items for you. One is in your packet. This is the month to test your username and passwords at the Oregon Government Ethics website. And if you've forgotten your username or your password, don't call me. I don't have it. Call the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, and they will walk you through the process to reset it. So I was asked by Joe last year to just give you more reminders, so I am. You have a little blue sheet of paper in front of you. You have a very busy February, and we have some extra what I call on the forward-looking calendar community partner meetings this month. So you have one with the school board next Monday, the 12th, at their district office. It's just from 6 to 7, and it's upstairs in their boardroom. For those of you not familiar where their offices are, I put the street address on there. And then I just put attending. I don't assume that all of you are going unless I'm told. And I was going through my folder just finding when we set these dates. And I'd only heard from Bob and Joe. So if you can't make it, let me know. I just need to let my peer at the school district know how many people are coming so they know how to set up the room and that kind of thing. And then a reminder that you're meeting this month with CPRD for your joint meeting that they are hosting, and that will be at their admin office at the Falcon Crest Room. You're going to meet with them from 6 to 7, and then they're going to have their regular board meeting following. They are paying for dinner from Sandwich Express. I have a list down there of who's attending. I did not get orders from either Scott or Steven, so I did not know if you were going or you just forgot to turn your order in. If you forgot to turn your order in, I have extra forms I brought with me tonight, and I'll call Steven. And that's it. I just wanted to highlight those. They are every week on that parking lot, like at the bottom of the parking lot on the calendar. I know it's your favorite thing to read. I can tell. See, Patrick, it's a page turner. So anyway, that was it. I just had looked at the calendar this morning and went, ooh, it's a busy month. So I thought I would let you know, because I know you all have lives and you need to schedule things around the most important thing, which is getting together with your fellow city councilors. That's it for me.
Councilor Johnson?
Yeah, I was curious, just to clarify, the school board meeting, is that one of our joint meetings? Is that, or was that just meant for you guys to go and download? Okay, cool. I'll be there at the school board one.
Yeah, I've been calling them community partner meetings. Yeah, when they came here last time, now you're going there. Okay. Okay.
I'm glad you all decided finally to go. Anything else, Sue?
No, that's all I had for tonight. And for what you guys are going to talk about, see Joe.
Local government land grant, Joe.
Mayor and Council, I emailed you a notice. There's an opportunity, if it's not something that's normally our function, but in parks, the state has an advisory group, and they're looking for two kinds of, well, you'd fit into the general participant or general advisor to talk about local park programs. So something here might be of how they're working at Shampooey, and also about funding trail systems that come through the area. And CPRD also has a record of it. So you have it in your email.
They're looking for one elected official from the area. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the city of Newberg, could be CPRD, could be a school district for that matter.
Yep.
And they're looking for one citizen at large. And this is state parks, am I correct?
Right. Mayor, I don't think the elected official week, that's for 15,000 and less. So this.
Well, communities of 15,000 or less.
Yeah. So we're looking at the open public member. You wish to do that.
I guess, thank you for the clarification, and that's right, it was. Denise?
So last Friday, the Newberg Dundee Police Foundation, Double the Visit and Hit Machine hosted a benefit concert for K9 Arco's new car, because, he's our senior K9 officer, and all these rookies are driving around in new rigs, and he's got an old car, so we feel bad for him. About 200 people came. Some were very, very short, and some were very, very tall, some were very young, and some were very old. And everybody had a really, really super good time. Hit Machine was fantastic. And if you go on the Newberg Dundee Police Department and K9 Facebook page, you can see Arco with a picture with the band. Took a picture with the band. It was Arco's first concert, but he was definitely the star. We had a woman bring a jar of coins and dollar bills that she'd been saving. And I said, oh, you want to go have your picture taken with Arco? And she almost like couldn't believe it. She was crying. She was so excited, and she went and had her picture taken with Arco. And he loved it. He loved it. He went up on the stage before the concert started, and he behaved well all night long. Good. And Sergeant Wallace was our security, but it wasn't a rough crowd. Everyone was pretty calm. We raised somewhere in the neighborhood of $7,500. But I think the event was a huge success. And Councilor Murray was there with his family. Good. My husband was working, as every event that I host, he works. Yeah.
Anything else? Councilor Johnson? Didn't have it on the list.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I apologize.
Yeah,
I thought this was going to go a lot later than it did.
That would
Done.
make some money.
I'll pay $1 for this.
That's an idea. Bear this in mind. New rule. If you don't let me know at the beginning, it's going to cost you $1.
Mayor, I think you should bring that up at Council Rule Committee.
Councilor Johnson.
I thought this was going to go later. I'm simply asking the council to have staff investigate this. I got a cockamamie idea that what I'd like to see some sort of proposal come back from staff on a financial, legal, and administrative idea is something along the lines of, if a person meets our affordable housing criteria, that is 80% of the median income, that if their municipal service statement, if they pay the municipal service statement, the water bill, if they pay the water and sewer portion but don't pay the fees that are associated with that, that we do not turn their water off. But they have to meet those criteria. I'd just like to know what kind of budgetary impact that would have, what kind of legal, and at this point it's just an idea, but before I requested staff to do anything, I wanted to find out if that was even something we'd want to consider or think about or talk about. And we could change the criteria too, just as an idea, as a kernel.
Councilor Murray.
I think it's a good idea. I thought that we have money set aside for low-income families for things like the water bill. So, oh, those specific on the water.
If I may, Mr. Mayor. So the idea is that we're turning people's water off because they maybe are paying a part of the bill and not the entire bill, or maybe they think I can't pay the whole bill, so I'm just not going to pay the entire thing. And with a public outreach in the bills, we could say, hey, look, pay your water and sewer at least in this, and let us know. And if you can't afford the fees, we can do other things. We can put a lien on their house. We can, we can charge their account and charge them interest. We can find other ways to. What I'm afraid of is, as we hear proposals about raising fees on the municipal service statement, I personally am uncomfortable if we're going to add fees to those bills, turning somebody's water off for something that has nothing to do with water. And to me, that's kind of an essential service that we provide. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. Now, I don't know what that looks like. It's just, I want to find some methodology to where we could let people, maybe they lose their job and they're out of work for 6 months, and then they can start paying it back. But they'd have to meet that 80% median income requirement for this to kick in. And I have no clue what the financial impact would be or if it could even be done. But before I personally asked staff, hey, why don't we look into this, I wanted to make sure at least some of us were in agreement that we should take a first blush at it and see if it was even worth looking into.
I could support that.
I would have one question of staff. How many turnoffs do we have? You know, if we used to have 50 turnoffs and now we have 10 turnoffs, I would look at it in one way. But if we continue to have 50 or 60 turnoffs every month, I would look at it a different way. So I think we need that kind of an answer. But we used to have more than that. We had bukus for a while.
And if I might follow on to your comment, if nothing else, as we discuss these fee increases, this shows that as a council and as a city, we're thinking about these issues and how to mitigate some of these. So while it might only be a dozen, you know, the optics of it, I think, make it look like, yeah, we recognize for that lower segment, the lower income segment of our community, we're trying to find ways to meet them halfway.
I'm kind of hearing a consensus that you would like to have the staff come back with some alternatives without being locked into anything, nor is the council locked into any particular activity. Do you want to put a time frame around that? Pre or post budget season?
I'd say post-budget season. I don't, yeah,
Post budget?
Because we have budget coming up, we have a lot of things coming up on our plate. I just wanted to get it out there as an idea.
I think post budget would be workable for staff. All right, you got a new task. Anything else? All right. I'm listening. Oh. We are adjourned. Thank you.